You must. Yep. Because I remember. All right, hang on. Here on Alva. Do you want Rocky to sit by Alva? And you want Shersham to sit in the middle? Is that in the middle? Oh. And how about that? Well, unless she's back in his place. Dr. Who? Cummings, Glenn. Glenn, Cummings, Sherstrom, and bylaws committee. This is the rec. Right. So those are already connected. Okay. When is it they had a meeting? They didn't miss out a meeting.
Is it?
I think
Oh, whoop, whoop.
Yay! I have been taught this a long time ago, but I'm not going to.
Yes.
I was close, wasn't I? And then when you, then it'll say, let them down. That's easy. I'm so glad that.
does look very
A little bit better.
more
You can-
roomy.
you can hear better. Found this. Oh, it sure did. I don't know what to do with it. I don't want it. Hey, did she show up?
Hi.
Okay, good. Are they, do they? Excellent. So you've already let the 1 o'clock in?
Hi, Your Honor.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, I can take her back. I'm almost done. Okay, thank you.
Oh, you guys could hear us. That's what I just told her. I said, we're live streaming. Be careful.
We have Superintendent Hannah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we don't know if he's gonna be able. Are we broadcasting it all on YouTube?
We are. He's gonna turn the mics off right now. So
But he'll let us know when it's turned on.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep it. I am fully vaccinated.
Me too.
Me too.
Right. So, Your Honor, the camera.
I did meet with Judge Clark last week, and he's very excited about doing it for 14 as well. So,
Oh, good, good.
yeah. And he doesn't even want to defer to the magistrate. He says, no, I'm all in. I'm good.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that was good.
All right, are we televising and all that? Are we ready to go?
We're waiting for Commissioner Cummings, Your Honor.
Is Commissioner Cummings on the committee?
Yes, she,
Yes.
That's how much I know. All right. Councilman. Walter Stocks.
Walter, hey, good to see you. Hey, Doctor.
Mr. Stocks and I work together on defendants.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. Those all.
Exactly.
My tricks are get people to do the right thing, I hope.
There she is.
Hey, Commissioner Cummings. How are you? You are the most punctual human being I know. You are on time. Yeah, surprising, but I got nothing. I don't know. I'm just happy that I'm allowed to be in the fishing chamber. Well, it's 1:30, which is the time. We don't got a tremendous amount of time. So if it's acceptable to everybody, I'll call the order.
Please.
All right, so we're calling to order. Should have a hard copy package of a proposed agenda. It's our first ever meeting, so we don't have any minutes for the bylaws. This is the bylaws committee meeting, Children's Services Council of Leon. Proposed agenda is called to order, approve the agenda, review and recommend proposed bylaws, set the next meeting date. Preview of coming attractions. I hope there's not any. Kind of hoping that this is it for the bylaws. Agenda for the next meeting, kind of the same. Member comment, adjourn immediately to the next meeting. It's a, so that's the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Yes. And any discussion or objection? So we'll show the agenda is approved. Any public comment? Any public comment? We don't have a lot of the public here. So folks who come in late, of course, we'll let them come. So review and recommend proposed bylaws. So the reason this committee exists is because when I was first trying to figure out what we would do on our first council meeting, I was going through the statute, and I saw bylaws, and didn't know what the bylaws were, or how it worked, or anything. And now, having looked at the bylaws of a bunch of different children's services, they're not much different. And they're not very complicated. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. So the bylaws are very similar. So what I've given you is the Alachua County bylaws, and then the Escambia County bylaws. And they're so similar that I don't think it makes an enormous amount of time. There's a sense to spend an enormous amount of time on the bylaws unless somebody feels strongly about the bylaws. We're going to go through them one page at a time here in just a second. But that's my general theory. The only change that I'm going to ask that we consider is we've got this interim period of time that exists until we can get an executive administrator or interim administrator director hired, and we can get onto and until we can kind of get past the first trim process, and then we can get to the regular monthly meetings. So when we get to what I'm going to ask that we think about, when we get to the schedule of meetings, that we, during the interim period, which we figure out how to define it, during the interim period until we go to the monthly meetings, we're going to set a schedule of meetings to get us through our first trim period, which is sometime in the fall. So that's my basic thoughts about the meetings, about the bylaws, but otherwise I'm going to propose that we adapt Alachua's bylaws for our Children's Services Council. And also let me just note that the entire bylaws committee is present. All right, so the preamble, it's a statutory Children's Services Council. That's all that says, and that it's been duly approved by the electorate. So if you're on our package, if you go to agenda item 4, page 2, you'll have the bylaws. Any discussion of the preamble?
And we would just move those to change to the Leon County ordinance with the Leon County reference.
Exactly.
So Judge, just a question, when we complete our business today, we will be able to give our result to an administrator who could make these edits. And then at some future meeting, these bylaws will be presented as what the committee's recommendation is.
Yes, the administrator who physically typed these ones is me. So I'm gonna propose that we ask Jessica to do that. I think I've emailed the Word document to her.
Perfect.
Does that work for
And I would
everybody?
suppose we wouldn't present it at today's meeting, but at a future.
So what we're gonna do is report of what we did, and then we'll send, for the next meeting, we'll have hopefully an agenda item to approve the bylaws. That's my hope. All right, so that's page 1. I'm sorry, page 2. If you turn to page 3, membership and term of office, an awful lot of words that says what the statute says. So it says it's 10 members, just like the statute says, 5 appointed by the governor after. Do you have, Commissioner, do you need a package? Okay. So it's exactly the same as the statute. I don't see anything in there that's any different. Membership and terms of office is defined by statute.
And Judge, just to be clear, in both of these examples, the entity has chosen them to call themselves the Children's Trust. I would imagine that in ours, it would say the Children's Services Council of Leon County. And then any references to the entity would probably be the council versus the trust.
Exactly. That was my thinking. Is that okay?
And I also just note on this page, there is a error about the third line from the last with the extra Y.
Help me out. Where, which
Upon
one? Oh, yeah, it's just
recommendation, E or the Y there.
it's possible that I was channeling my inner Spanish. What's that? I just got a stray Y in the middle of the document.
I apologize. It's the fourth line from the bottom, recommendation, then there's a letter Y. So we just want to get rid of that Y. This is on.
Upon recommendation, it probably is. I think
Okay.
it is.
Very good. Thank you.
I think it is. One substantive thing, and I'm not sure that it's in the statute, is the last sentence. Members shall serve until their replacement is selected or they have been otherwise removed from office. But if you come to the end of the term and the governor doesn't make an appointment, the council still has a quorum, still has the ability to operate at full strength until the governor makes an appointment. The idea. Hello, how are you? No, bylaws committee. Feel free, have, no worries. All right, so let's turn to page. So any discussion, dispute about the.
No issues.
And we'll all have, and I recognize that I'm flying. We'll all have the opportunity as the full council to make further suggestions, changes, tweaks. it may be a 2-meeting process to get bylaws done. I recognize that it's an enormous amount to consume today. For regular meetings. So this provides for monthly meetings set by the trust at their November meeting. So the way that Alachua is organized is sort of the November meeting is their organizational meeting annually. So that's the idea there. That may or may not work for us.
And Judge, there's an alternative in the Escambia that says regular meetings of the board shall be held monthly at a time and place set by the board. And it's not specific to a month that like Alachua did.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that we use the Escambia language for that first sentence. A
Fair
little
enough.
bit more generic and less specific as to a meeting month.
In other words, we don't establish when the council establishes the meeting schedule. Is that good enough? Yeah, I think by consensus, I'll make that edit. Let's see. Sure is. Tis. I don't think I meant to do that. The notice is to be accompanied by a tentative agenda for the meeting. All right, very good.
Judge, the other difference between Escambia and Alachua is Alachua gives 5 days prior notice. Escambia has 7 days prior notice. Obviously, this is something that's flexible, that each board can decide what they want. I would imagine we might want a longer time to prepare for meetings, but a week is certainly substantial, but 5 days might not be sufficient for some. So I think it's worth discussion whether we want 5 or 7.
A good point. So, I mean, I'll tell you my thinking about this. A lot of my thinking, you guys have a thought about it? Go ahead, Commissioner Cummings. And
I believe it is 7 days.
it seems sensible. The only thing I'll tell you is in my, let me read the actual language.
And this is notice of a regular meeting.
Yeah,
So this is one you should already know about.
yes, that's right. I mean, I think that's a sensible thing. And at the moment, I'm attuned to
Right.
the hysteria, the time pressure that we're under to get started. And so, but
And the difference here is that in this notice, you would get a copy of the agenda.
in
As opposed to just knowing when the meeting is, you'd actually know what the meeting content is.
exactly. And in truth, in the interest of transparency and in the interest of maximizing public participation, more notice is probably better. So 7 days, perfect. Thank you, Walter. Yes. We don't have a treasurer. We don't have a treasurer because we don't have any money. But I suspect we're going to want to have some financial officer here at this point. And we're going to get to officers here in just a moment. But you're right, we don't have a treasurer now. And that's going to be something we're going to need to talk about in the whole meeting. All right.
I'd also just note that in the Escambia presentation, there are 2 additional paragraphs that are added on to this section. One deals with a requirement related to special districts that talks about advertising 7 days before. And the other mentions special meetings. Those 2 paragraphs are not in the Alachua bylaws. And I know that Escambia was most recent, and I think a judge sat on their bylaws committee as well. So I would just at least make sure we know that those are possible.
Show me what page you are in.
This is page 2 of Escambia under Article 2 meetings.
Yep.
It's just an additional 2 paragraphs under the special meeting section that deals with advertising and also notices.
Yep.
I think they're useful paragraphs. They don't seem to be contradictory, and they might come from a point of knowledge that Alachua just didn't have at the time they wrote theirs.
Yeah, and you guys all understand that Walter is on the Escambia, so I am not embarrassed that he knows their bylaws far better than I do. So for discussion and consideration by the council, everybody feel like we should add those 2 paragraphs to our proposed bylaws?
I'm fine. My quick question, wow, this is loud, I'm sorry. My quick question is that it says that the meeting has to be advertised in a newspaper or general paid circulation in the county. I thought that was very specific. Is that a requirement?
I think it's in statute. Walter, is that your memory?
I believe that
in the
is the
statute.
requirement.
For the, Your Honor, for the sunshine law.
Yeah, for sunshine, we got you.
Okay,
Yeah,
and that's fine.
yeah, and there was some proposed legislation this year to try and loosen that up a little bit, but I don't think it passed.
And then specifically in that second paragraph, and this is one that is incredibly important to transparency, the sentence that says only subjects appearing on special agendas may be discussed at the called meeting.
Yeah.
That's really important to put in your bylaws so that you can reference back to that if someone wants to add an item or talk about something else. If it's not agended, it doesn't get discussed.
Exactly. So,
I'm agree with that.
and honestly, when we get, we need to, when we get in our meeting this afternoon, because this is all new to me, to be perfectly candid. We need to emphasize that because in our enthusiasm and in our newness, my enthusiasm and my newness, I have a tendency to get far afield. And it's good to remember that that's important. All right, so we're going to add those two paragraphs to the bylaws for consideration. Okay. Yeah, and then emergency meetings. God forbid that we ever have to have an emergency meeting.
I know.
The only additional item I believe that Escambia focused here on was the sentence that said the annual budget cannot be approved in an emergency meeting. I'm not real sure what the motivation was to add that. I don't think it's necessary, but I wanted to point it out that that was something specific that they did.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
Hopefully that would never be
No.
considered.
But I do think we should include it because hope is just not a strategy. You just never know.
Doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cummings, what are your thoughts?
But based on our budgetary procedures, I don't think it would ever happen anyway. I mean, I don't believe we need to just put extraneous things in there just because.
Yeah, the value in it to me is for people like me who are not used to running a budget, who are not used to being on the county commission, sort of like for our orientation purposes. So maybe what we do is when we introduce these bylaws, we explain, this is in Escambia.
Oh.
We don't think it's necessary because it should be intuitively obvious to every one of us that we are not going to be doing an emergency meeting to approve the budget, that the public doesn't get a chance to comment.
And the real sort of, the reason you would want it, if you wanted it, would be to tell the public that clearly we're not going to notice a 24-hour meeting for a budget. That's not going to happen in this county. So there is a reason for it. It's just not absolutely critically necessary. So it's useful, but it's a choice.
All right, fair enough. Okay. Public meetings, we're subject to we're on page 6 now. We're subject to the public meetings requirements. Minutes were required by statute to keep minutes. Initial year of existence, the requirements in the statute apply.
This section, Escambia didn't feel was needed. They left it out. Alachua, as you guys remember from our briefing, didn't sit their whole committee till 18 months. So I think that they specifically had an initial year of existence issue
Yeah,
because they weren't fully sated.
yeah,
I think in our case, I don't know that section 6 is needed.
yeah, and I'm not, I certainly don't think it adds it. Okay to take that out?
I'm okay with that.
So we'll take
removing it.
section
It also allows us not to have to change our bylaws right away because it's past the initial year.
Yeah,
You know, it's like, let's get rid of stuff that we're gonna already have to edit out.
yes, exactly. All right, page 7 now, voting. I didn't note any differences between this, but I have to tell you, I am now worried, I'm now waiting for.
No, the
Mr.
only
Sparks.
difference here is that the term quorum was actually defined first. Before you actually talk about the voting, you decide what a quorum is.
Yeah,
So Escambia pushed quorum up to A
yep,
and then followed along with the same language. So it's just a preference. It doesn't, because it's B, doesn't give it higher priority, but you might want to read it first,
right. You
right?
can't,
You
you
might want to
can't,
know what a quorum is before you decide who can vote.
you can't do any
That's
voting
majority.
until you have a quorum.
And that's majority, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Majority.
Presence of a majority of all members is a quorum, so we'll change.
And because it says all members, it has to be 6, right? 6 is the number we always have to have in order to be a
To
quorum.
transact business, yeah.
The other, Judge, just a quick note in item D, we need the letter T in front of the WO 2/3.
Yep, fair enough. Thank you. Thank you. And
Just,
Go ahead.
Your Honor, in item D, it seems that the second sentence, I'm sorry, the first sentence, it seems sort of out of place. I would, because amendments have to be passed by 2/3 of the members. Everything else is by majority vote. So I wouldn't have both of those provisions in D. I would remove the first sentence and let it become E, and let that second sentence be D, because it's consistent with the affirmative vote of the majority members present.
Well, the C is the requirement that says majority of members present. So let's say we have 7, it would take 4 to do something.
Oh, no, that's not my debate.
No, then D is the exceptions to C.
I understand, which I'm
So-
saying, the exceptions should be
Separate.
separate,
2 separate exceptions.
right?
Okay. I
Fair
mean, that's fine with me. I think it's important though to 2/3 of serving and majority of serving is a number against 10, not against present,
That's
right? That's the idea there.
It's absolute, not a quorum.
Yes.
Yeah, I was able to understand that as I read it.
All right, so everybody okay? Everybody more or less on the same page on page 7?
Yes.
Let's go to page 8, which is officers, elections, vacancies. And here is where we have to decide, we've got a chair and a vice chair now. We don't need a treasurer at this moment because we don't have any money. We hope soon to have some money. So we probably should need some sort of a financial officer. So do we want to call our financial officer a treasurer?
I think that's consistent.
Everybody okay with it? Do we need a treasurer?
I don't have a problem.
Fine with that.
All
That
right,
works.
we're going to run out of committee members here fairly soon. The duties of the chair are pretty straightforward.
Right.
Preside at meetings, be an ex officio members of committees, serve as a member of the executive committee. We don't have an executive committee, but if we have one, the chair has to be a member. Appoint committees, perform duties usually pertaining to the chair. That's my favorite one. But here's the really, in all seriousness, be the primary check signer of the trust. So that's subject to counter signature by another member or by the executive director. So that's, I am terrified of public money, let me just tell you. So that very, very serious business as far as I'm concerned. Anything else to say about the duties of the chair, Walter?
No, I have just some comments on the entire section, but not specifically on any of the duties.
Sure, go ahead.
In the Escambia model, they took this section to allow for the vacancy discussion to be in here. I think the Alachua model has it as well, but they also brought committees into this discussion and didn't leave committees kind of hanging out there on its own.
Mhm.
So I would recommend that, because this is talking about structure,
Yep.
that the title be similar to Escambia, officers, election, vacancies, and committees. And that we bring that committee paragraph over to this page, just because we do talk about an executive committee on this page already. We talk about ad hoc committees on this page, and we talk about a budget planning committee. So already on this page, we have 3 references to committees. So I think it's important to have the committees paragraph on this page also.
All right, so, and that's just section 4, which is the 2 sentences, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's section 3 of page 10 on the Alachua. We would just move it over. In other words, it wouldn't be stuck up under finance, which to me is not a good place for it.
I'm looking at the wrong thing, Walter, I'm sorry.
In the Alachua version, which is the one we're using as our template,
Right,
page 10, there's a paragraph on committees.
oh, and you would just
3.
move it.
We would move it to Article 4 and add committees to the title.
All
On page 8,
right.
Yes,
okay.
that way we're talking about structure all on the same page.
Yeah, and that makes more sense. It belongs there, not really in finance, right?
And then with the other concept is that on page 9, we have an elections and vacancies paragraph. That should also be in Article 4, which is titled elections and vacancies, not in Article 5.
So commit, one thing at a time. So we're going to move,
And I should have done that one first, so I apologize.
that's all right. So we're going to move page 10, committees, section 3 is going to become E, committees on page 8. Is that right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I would think probably maybe D, because I think you want to move the elections and vacancies
Okay.
to the
All
new,
right.
the new E.
Right. Very soon, you're going to end up doing the typing. And then what's the next thing you were saying?
And then committees would move to the one below that.
Okay. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
It's
that
fine.
makes sense.
Mhm.
All right, very good. And then what's the next thing that you said?
That was it.
All right, very good. So then that brings us to page 9, conduct of business. This is just the statutory reporting requirement, statutory budgeting requirement, elections and vacancies. And we're moving elections.
Elections, right.
Where, excuse me, where are we moving section 3?
Yes, section 3 moves
just
to the
moved
prior
it back.
page.
Elect,
To page 9
yeah,
or page 8?
Page 8.
so section 3 becomes E,
Okay.
or
Page
E or
8.
F, actually.
And Judge, because we now have taken section 3 from this page and section 3 from the next page, page 10, and moved them, there is now only the 2 sections, reporting and budgeting, and the next page, fiscal year and budget. It all sounds like the same stuff.
Yep, collapse them.
Alachua collapsed them on the same subsection, or Escambia called them finance, and put them under the same area.
Fair enough, and no change in substance.
Right.
Right.
So does it simplify our
So-
bylaws okay with
That's fine.
everybody?
Just use the Escambia one, start with the fiscal year, go to reporting, then the budget.
It's fine.
Confused.
Saves us a section.
All right, fair enough. So, and where does reporting go then? Section 1 reporting, does it stay under conduct of business? We're just moving budgeting to the following section, is that the idea?
Yeah, reporting is. Reporting is in the same section, fiscal year, reporting, and then budget.
So we're just collapsing it all into
Yeah,
one. Okay,
that's correct.
so and we can call that finance? That we said? Article
Finance-
5,
Finance is the more appropriate title.
all right. Is that okay with you guys?
Yes.
That's fine.
All right,
Mhm.
okay. Fiscal year October 1 to September 30. Now, see, this always makes me nervous, Commissioner Cummings, because I know I don't understand the county fiscal year very well.
All good.
All good, you think? All right. Executive Director responsible for submitting a tentative annual budget.
So on this one, if you look to the Escambia, they have 9 duties. And I would say that maybe one of the most critical ones is number 8, the day-to-day operations and serving as a liaison with the staff and board. In my experience in Hillsborough, that executive director hand-walked every board member through everything, and it really made the difference. So that liaison role is not well represented in the Alachua version, so I would recommend adopting the Escambia version on this one.
And
Repeat that
show me
again.
on the Escambia version that where you, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just need him to repeat that again for me.
On the Escambia version, there's 9 tasks.
I see it, page 8.
And number 8, which is critical, is the liaison role to the board.
Okay,
That's not well represented in the Alachua description.
okay,
So I would recommend we take the Escambia version on this one.
okay.
And show me the page that you're on in the.
Page
Escambia.
8 of the Escambia version.
All right. There we go. All right. So in other words, what you're proposing, Walter, is that we take Article 6, employment of executive director, and adapt
Just
that.
use the Escambia model, correct?
Any discussion of that from you guys? All right, so
I think that's a good idea, Your Honor.
and then that brings us to,
2 more sections, conflict of interest.
are we, so we're substituting that for what is page 11 of
The
Alachua?
entire page.
That's coming out all together?
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yes,
Yes,
Okay.
the executive director,
All
correct?
right, very good. Everybody's okay. And now conflict of interest, Article 8, we're very close to starting on time. Not quite. Article 8, conflict of interest.
okay, this is where I had some, I really like the Escambia version better in D, where there was a lot more specificity in that particular section than there was in the Alachua section about the member and working in an agency and the amount of dollars from the funds that can go to that particular agency. I liked the specificity from the Escambia version better. I thought Alachua just left it a bit vague, and I was worried about that. What's been your experience, Walter?
So and what it says is no member, what the Escambia version says is no member shall serve as member of any agency.
One more than
When more than 10% of the agency's budget is provided by the trust,
Right. And no portion of a
That's
member's salary may be
Escambia.
paid.
Mhm.
correct?
Mhm.
And it wasn't there in the Escambia, in the Alachua version, it just said that you're gonna follow, I can't remember. It said that it will follow the normal, nothing will be done to provide the appearance of a conflict of interest. I just thought that was too vague, and I liked the specificity of the Escambia version.
Fair enough. Commissioner Cummings, you have any thoughts about it?
I agree.
100% agree.
Yeah,
All right, so
I
we
agree.
will add to page, we probably just should have started with the Escambia.
With a Escambia, really.
Add to page 12.
Mhm.
We are almost done. Members of the trust will, prior to voting on a funding issue, disclose any interest in the program. Members of the trust will comply with all Florida statutes relating to conflict of interest. And then we'll add that D, no member shall serve. All right, good. That brings us to rules of order. Getting thrown off the board if you don't show up.
Judge Alachua offered the Sturgis parliamentary rules, and Escambia is following Robert's Rules of Order. Do you have a preference?
I have no preference.
I think we're most familiar with Robert's Rules of Order.
Robert's
I don't know
rules it
churches,
is.
so Roberts makes sense to me.
Mhm.
Robert's rules. We should have started with the Scambi. I blame myself.
And then in board attendance, there is a specific statement that the chair shall request somebody to be removed. Escambia changed that word to may. It allowed the chair flexibility that if someone is absent a certain number of meetings, it still is the option of the chair to remove the person, not shall.
Maybe somebody's sick, maybe somebody's.
Could be extended,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think that may is a good change.
May is okay with everybody?
Yes, sir. Mhm.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments, discussion? So this is for the members of the public who are here, this is our bylaws committee meeting. When we first started on the agenda, we had public comment at the beginning on the bylaws committee meeting. There wasn't anybody here at that time, so I wanted, before we close, before we vote, and the vote that I'm going to propose is that we put these into a final form and present them at our next full council meeting for consideration and further action by the full council. Before I do that, if there's anybody who wants to make public comment to the bylaws committee. Public comment to the bylaws committee, public comment to the bylaws committee. All right, so yes, Commissioner.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the bylaws as discussed today with the necessary amendments and corrections and present them to our next council board meeting.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Any discussion, any objections? So we'll show that passing unanimously. Any member, and that's really the only item on the agenda. Any member comment?
Great job, Judge.
What's that?
Great job.
Oh, thank you,
Well
Walter. All right, so that ends our bylaws committee meeting. And we'll go right into our Children's Services Council meeting. And who are we missing? Who are we missing? We got,
How are you today?
hey, there he is. Hey, we're right, Mr. Hannah, so good to see you. Give you the COVID elbow. So nice to see you. Wait a minute,
Got moved, Mark.
where are you sitting?
I don't know. Whoever, I can see that out
There's,
there.
there's an empty chair.
Am I down there?
We are missing a seat.
I can sit anywhere.
You can scoot over.
Did Mark get a seat?
Scooting over.
Can we pull up closer?
I got that.
Let's bring a chair up for Mr. O'Brien. Can we scoot down just a little bit?
Absolutely. We can make room. Sarah, Mike. All right.
Kids done. I guess I need to turn off.
All right. All right, so if your red light is on, your microphone is on. All right, so I'll now call to order this publicly noticed meeting of the Children's Services Council of Leon County, scheduled for Wednesday, May 19th at 2 o'clock. I'll note that it's 6 minutes after 2, and we'll go ahead and get started. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. And it's been a work in progress. We've been hard at work since I've been hard at work, and Ms. Goodman Taylor, Ms. Garber, been hard at work since the last, but as a consequence, we have an agenda to discuss, and the items on the agenda called to order: approval of the agenda, approval of minutes, public comment, then status update on interlocal agreement. Our guest speaker today is Colin Murphy, the Executive Director of the Children's Trust of Alachua County, who has graciously agreed to be here. And I'll just tell you, I had a long talk with him, and he has some really good practical advice for us, I think. Status update on bylaws. Those of you who were here just a few minutes early probably have a pretty good idea of what the status update on the bylaws is. Truth in millage, which includes a couple of things that we know we have to decide. We have to decide whether to tell the property assessor whether we want to proceed to try and be on, to levy property taxes this year or wait till next year. Budget discussion and interim executive director are interrelated. Timeline, agenda for the next meeting. The timeline has to do with the interrelationship between trying to get started, trying to get an executive or an interim administrator hired, trying to get staff hired at the same time that we're trying to integrate our trim deadlines, our truth and millage deadlines. Agenda for the next meeting, member comment and adjournment. Any discussion of the agenda? Any discussion, any objection? Without objection, we'll show the agenda approved. Next is approval of the minutes.
A second.
Any discussion of the minutes?
Sorry about that. When I was reading through this, it said that Ms. Stripling mentioned to move the agenda, item number 12, public comment up. Was that you, Ms. Stripling, or was that Ms. Carolyn, Ms. Cummings? I thought it was Ms. Cummings that
It
made
was
that
Ms.
recommendation.
Cummings.
So I just would request that we make that change on the minutes, please.
And just for my help, show me what page of the minutes.
So I'm on page 1 where it says approve agenda. And then it said Ms. Stripling motion to move agenda item 12, public comment, to agenda item number 2. It's under section 1. It was actually Ms. Cummings, or Attorney Cummings.
Oh, fair enough. I see it. So the third sentence under approve the agenda should say Commissioner Cummings instead of Ms. Strickland.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
So to treat that as a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any objection, discussion? That's certainly consistent with my memory. So Ms. Goodman Taylor, can we just show the minutes corrected that Commissioner Cummings moved to move the agenda item?
Judge?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
My apologies. I hate to us linger. We have a lot of business and this is not that important, but I believe it's more of a wording error here. I believe my motion was to approve the agenda and then there was a second to approve the agenda. She had requested the public comment be moved up, but I believe without our motion to move the agenda, then we don't have an agenda that was approved for the last meeting.
Right, yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
And I think it was, if I remember correctly, Commissioner Cummings had offered an amendment to Ms. Strickland's motion, and that's why, in a weird sort of way, the minutes are accurate, that it was.
It's just not quite
The
complete.
word.
Right.
Yeah.
So Ms. Strickland moved the agenda, Ms. Cummings moved to,
To amend the
Amend.
motion.
all right, so that's the motion. Is that
There
the
we go.
motion? Ms.
That sounds like it.
All right.
There is none.
And so it's a motion that's been seconded by, I think, Council Member
He's got Liza.
O'Brien, if I heard correctly, and any objection to that correction? So we'll show the minutes corrected as described, and the minutes are then ready for approval. Any discussion or objection now to the minutes? All right, so we'll show the minutes approved. All right. So thank you so much for making us more accurate. All right, so public comment. Do we have any comment cards that have been submitted?
Yes, Your Honor, we have 3.
Afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for being here. Could you tell us your name?
Alexander Boyd,
You have the floor whenever you're ready. 3 minutes.
3013 Jim Lee Road. Okay. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to speak to you about this worthy cause. My name is Alexander J. Boyd, and I'm a senior at James S. Ricketts High School. address 3013 Jim Lee Road, Tallahassee, Florida. I am a student in the Advancement via Individual Determination College Prep Program, Florida's Trio Student Government Vice President, and I'll be attending Florida A&M University in the fall, majoring in architecture to pursue a career in business. As a person who could benefit from the work of this council, I am both excited and but yet concerned. I am excited that you will be making a difference in children's success, but I am also concerned because the stakes are so high for children who would like me. According to the US Census, Leon County is home to 54,606 children under the age of 18. However, arrest rates for juveniles reported in the Uniform Crime Report is higher in Leon County at 9% compared to 7% statewide. Additionally, African-American children serve out of school suspension at a rate of 70% in Leon County, almost twice the state rate of 39% for African-American children, and more than 2/3 of all children in Leon County who are suspended out of school. Those stats are unfortunate, but the difference is this council. In my studies, I have learned from Dr. Martin Luther King, and I quote, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." The success of all youth, and especially African-American youth, matters. As I look around this room, I see a very important entity missing from this council, the youth. I would hope that this council would consider youth to participate as active ad hoc members, which brings me to my final point, diversity. Diversity is key. As of right now, I cannot help but recognize that there are no Black men in the council. But I do believe that this council will be able to identify, research, fund, and provide healthy alternatives to root problems faced in all of our communities in Leon County. It takes collective actions to make corrective action. It has been an honor to speak to you, and I pray for brighter days for the youth in this county. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well said. All right, what other commenters do we have today?
Thank you very much. My name is Emily Fritz.
Thank you for being here.
My address is 1433 Vucare Drive, Tallahassee, 32308. First, I want to compliment you on your first meeting. I thought your organizational meeting went very well, and I thought you had meaningful discussion. Secondly, I want to talk to you about your budget. You have a very tight time frame to give information to the property appraiser. Obviously, I do think you need a little bit of money to run the office. You plan to hire an executive director. You probably need some money for legal fees. You need some money to contract for the needs assessment. So you do need some money for that. But I'm recommending that you not plan to budget any money for any programs at this point in time, for the simple reason that you don't have enough information to make any decisions. You'll be lucky if the needs assessment is done by March. It'll take several months just to go to through the RFP and contracting process to get to award the contract to the consultant for the needs assessment. And then it'll take them quite a while to dig through an enormous amount of data. In 2019, 150 children's programs at a funding level of over $200 million were identified. The consultant's going to have to do an analysis of what all those programs do. Since then, millions and millions of federal stimulus dollars have come to Leon County, and a large portion of that has gone to children's programs. In addition, Congress has not yet voted on the American Families Plan, which is $1.8 trillion, and it's exclusively for children and college students as well. We don't know what the final number will be, but I'm sure the president will get a lot of what he asked for. It could take months before we have any idea where that money's going. And the consultant's going to have to do an analysis of that. As you know, you can't supplant federal or state funds, and you can't duplicate federal or state funds. So you're going to have a lot of detailed information in order to make decisions about program funding. So my recommendation is fund a minimal amount to run the office and wait till the next fiscal year. I guess it would be this time next year, or to allocate money for programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here.
Judge, if I may just take a moment of privilege, I'd just like to thank the young man from Rickards for being here this afternoon. And so I missed the first meeting. I apologize. I'm glad to see I still have a name tag on the dais. But it's taken me a little while to adjust to not a boardroom. This is a very nice meeting room. But I would like to, again, thank you for coming, for being here today. Thank you for your leadership. I know you're excited about your graduation ceremony here in the weeks to come. And I saw the judge writing down some notes as you were speaking about having young people included in this group. And I think that is extremely important. So I'd just like to thank you for your courage and for you speaking to us today. Thank you, Judge.
Thanks very much. And you should know that as soon as we knew you were going to be here, we threw Mr. O'Brien off the dais.
Well, yeah, well, don't do that, because my reason for not being here, I had the opportunity to stay at Mr. O'Brien's hotel for a couple of nights. And he treated me very well, thankfully. Everything turned out okay, but, and I'll just go ahead and say it, Mark, thank you for checking on me. Thank you for, I mean, you don't realize until you're in our hospital what an operation it is. And I'm just so thankful to have you and your leadership and taking care of people like me and others in our community. So thank you.
Thank you for being here, seeing you here. That's
Yeah, it's good.
Happy to see you. All right, so back to the agenda. Any additional public comment? Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner.
I'm so sorry, Commissioner. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, in the vein following the superintendent, I just wanted to just echo his sentiments toward the young man from Rickards High School. I have a special affinity toward Rickards because my son graduated from Rickards in the IB program some years ago. And I also share your sentiment about the fact that this council does lack Black male representation. That was my concern from the beginning. As a matter of fact, from the county commission, I did recommend a Black male. His name did go up to the governor's office. Unfortunately, he was not selected. But I can represent to you and this council that we certainly will do our best to fill that void for the lack of Black male representation on this council, and it's young men like you that need to come forward and speak to us. And we certainly appreciate the fact that you came forward today and expressed your sentiment to this council. So thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. All right, so additional public comment whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. I'm Courtney Atkins, Executive Director of Whole Child Leon. For those of you who may not know, Whole Child focuses on engaging the entire community around issues of young children, around child success. And I just wanted to share one way we do that is by publishing what we call the Status of the Child Report. This is very timely in that we have just, in the last few days, completed our community-wide assessment and have published the 2021 Status of the Child Report. This report, we used secondary data analysis. We held focus groups of all kinds of public and private organizations, community organizations. We went into the neighborhood. We worked with foster parents to get information. We've constructed this report around 10 critical issues that we think are most important, most negatively impacting children and families. Under each issue, you will see a description of the issue. You will see barriers to solving these issues. You'll see strategies to solving. You'll see local programs that are doing a pretty darn good job starting to address the issues. And then you'll see recommendations for programs, policies that might work for us in our community. It's our hope that you all as potential funders will use this report as a tool. I've brought a copy for everyone. So if you are interested in having one, I can leave them as appropriate for you to look at, but I just wanted to make you all aware.
Please leave them for us. I know we all want to read them. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Courtney, as long as you're standing there, I'm a little bit biased because I have recently resigned from Whole Child Leon's board so that I could serve on this and not worry about a conflict. But I'm very familiar with that annual report, and it is impressive. I will also suggest that annual report combined with what some of Ms. Fritz's comments, I think will serve this council well as we begin to do an assessment of what the needs are in the community. This report is not the end all be all. It's just awfully darn good. And I commend it to each one of us to read it cover to cover. It really is very well done.
Outstanding. Thank you so much.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Ms. Courtney, thank you so much. Does the report clearly define how the analysis was done, how the data was captured? I just wanted to make sure if there are any biases, it's clearly outlined in there.
The methodology is definitely in this report.
Okay,
But if you have any more questions, you can contact us.
thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to have a scientist on the council. Thank you for that question.
Judge, while we're on that subject, so where would the report that was produced by the planning council come into play in regards to a needs assessment? Because we spent almost 2 years as a group. We heard a lot of testimony. We gathered a lot of information. We had 3 staff members fully dedicated to that. I would assume that that would be a major component of our needs assessment, and then it's already been compiled.
So anybody else have any comments about it? I'll tell you my thinking.
Okay.
Some of us were on that committee and some of us weren't. Ultimately, it will be for the council to decide what the role of that report is and what the significance is of that effort for all of us. Those of us who were on the committee felt the way we felt, and the committee did the work that it did. Those of you who were not on the committee, you get the benefit of fresh eyes in your own viewpoint. But my hope is that once we get an interim administrator on the ground and working, that interim administrator looks at what's the other things that have been done in Alachua County recently, in Escambia County, the things that have been done historically in the state to get a needs assessment done, and comes to us with a recommendation. And my hope is that not only the work that the committee did, but the work that the county commission staff did, which was staggering, forms the starting point for our needs assessment. That's my hope. But it will be up to this, I mean, my view of it is that it'll be up to the council as a whole to decide. Fair enough, fair enough. And that brings us to, I think, a very timely question, because that brings us to the status update on the interlocal agreement. I'm going to give just a brief report. Y'all, the council had charged me to talk with the county administrator based on Commissioner Cummings' information, which I did. And the results were very, very helpful and useful. The most comforting thing for me was that the county administrator said that the county was used to standing up special districts, used to standing up organizations like ours, and had great technical expertise that you all know that I lack. And so that was great. They were very supportive, as Commissioner Cummings suggested, and are going to put an agenda item on the Board of County Commissions to authorize funding. They were supportive, very much supportive of infrastructure and organization and technical assistance. They did not suggest that they were supportive of funding programmatic aspects. In other words, funding actual services at this point. And I think for the same reason that everybody here is, that we don't have the infrastructure built yet to support how to say this, to support an orderly process for establishing our priorities yet. So a lot of support with adequate funding, I think, by any of our, I'm guessing by any of our measures to support our infrastructure and getting off the grounds, getting through the trim process, and getting the structures put in place to be able to have that orderly process to establish our priorities and our funding priorities. So that's a pretty broad general description. What I would propose now is that we turn it over to Mr. Murphy, and then we'll come back to the county after we hear from Mr. Murphy. And thank you so much for coming this way on short notice.
It's got to just feel nice to be in Leon County.
It is, I'm sure.
Yeah, just getting out of Alachua County. It's always good.
He's in the enemy territory.
Is that a garnet tie that I detect?
Thanks for fixing our bylaws, by the way. We'll take those changes back to our board. And if you'd have told me a year ago I'd be coming from Gainesville to root for something to be successful in Tallahassee, I might not have believed you. But I want you to know I was more than happy to come because we are definitely rooting for your success in Gainesville, here in Leon County. All of my colleagues around the state are rooting for your success. Successful children's councils benefit all of us. They benefit your community. They benefit our children because they move places, but they also benefit the credibility of children's services councils across the state. And Florida is unique. This model is unique to the country. While other areas and other parts of the country can pass taxes from time to time for special things, what we have here in Florida is unique to the country. And so it's in all of our interests that you're successful. So Your Honor, thank you for asking me to come. And I hope my intent is really just to be helpful. So I do have a few things I wanted to talk about that I thought you might be interested in, but if at some point I'm not helpful, just ask me to stop. Probably the best way, if it pleases the chair, would be if you have questions, just ask me during the context of what I'm saying. And I do have some topics, but if you want to go off topic, I'll try to be as helpful as I can. And if not, that's okay too. So I learned in church that if you made everything start with the same letter, people remembered it also. I was going to talk about three things: interlocal agreements, your infrastructure, and then implementation. So quick timeline. Our organization became official on December 1st, 2018, following the November 2018 election, and we did make the trim process. We had some obstacles that you didn't have. For example, there was also a gubernatorial election that year, and we didn't get a full children's council until February of 2020. So I was actually hired with only a board of 5, and we had our 15 appointee or nominees attend all the meetings, and eventually, about 2 weeks after I was hired, the governor finally selected the other 5. So we had that barrier. So you have some things going in your favor already.
And you know what? Let me just stop you because as an amateur chair, I just realized the following: we did not take roll. So we need to take roll and make sure that we have a quorum. So I apologize so much. Ms. Goodman-Taylor, whenever you're ready, if you just call the roll.
Good afternoon, council members. Please announce your presence when I call your name. Ms. Carmen Connor. Present. Commissioner Carolyn D. Cummings.
Present.
Dr. Sandra Glenn.
Here.
Superintendent of Schools Rocky Hanna.
Present.
Ms. Liza McFadden.
Present.
Mr. Paul Mitchell.
Present.
Mr. Mark O'Brien.
Here.
DCF Northwest Regional Director Walter Sox.
Present.
The Honorable Jonathan Scherstrom.
Present.
Leon County School Board Member Alva Strickland.
Here.
Thank you so much. Mr. Murphy, whenever you're ready. We do have a quorum.
So as I said, we did make it through the trim process. Our board had their inaugural meeting in March, so just a little bit ahead of you. But by April, they had a draft budget. They had passed by June a tentative millage and budget to go to the county commission. And then we had the trim hearings in September and we're ready to go by October. So important to note that to do that, we did not get a loan from our county. In lieu of a loan from our county, the county and the county clerk provided a lot of, I would say a lot of in-kind staffing to the Children's Trust. So even if you got money right now, you probably wouldn't have anywhere to put it. So we had to delegate to the clerk of the court to open a bank account, sign the banks, get employee ID numbers, get just all of that stuff. We had to develop budgetary policies, fiscal policies, and investment policies, because even if when you do have a plan, money will come in and you'll have to have something to do with it. Then we delegated to the county attorney, who happened to be our registered agent. County HR developed the job description for the executive director. The community support services staffed the meeting, and the county attorney also provided, legal advice to the board at every meeting. So the staff, the roles were kind of dispersed. I think I heard at the last meeting that we had a loaned executive. We did have a single point of contact, but I wouldn't say that that person from the county was an interim, as you might think of it, with any kind of delegated decision-making authority. It was more of a coordinating entity to coordinate all these other aspects and players from the county. But I will say this, our county staff was really great getting that all together. Because like I said, by the second or third meeting, they had a draft budget ready to go, so the council could at least discuss it. So any questions so far? All right. So that was all done at no cost, but as soon as we started collecting revenues, we had an interlocal agreement with both the county and the clerk of the court. So the clerk of the court for us played the role that clerks play in many counties as a controller. They're the controller for our library district, for our county commission, and we contracted with them to be our controller, handling accounting, auditing, treasury services for a flat fee. We used other services in the county based on various fee structures, whether it was in-kind, hourly, no charge, a percent of services used, a flat rate. We continued our relationship with the county attorney. You're going to have an audit done your first year, so we just piggybacked on the county's auditor. The financial software hosting, I have an asterisk behind that. Unless you've had to deal with that, something you may overlook, but you're required to use the state's chart of accounts. You have to have some kind of accounting system. And usually procuring something like that, it can be a big deal and quite expensive. So our county had just procured a brand new system and gave us what's called an environment. The easiest way to explain it to you is kind of like sharing their Netflix password with us. We got our own spot. It was separate, but we piggybacked for just a small fee. Typically, we pay $87.50 a year for that. If we were to bring that on our own, it'd be about $100,000 up front and probably $20,000 a year. We may end up doing that. There's reasons why you do have your own system, but I'm not sure what we would have done without that to get started. And then to bring on the staff to hire me, and then the staff I brought in shortly after I was hired. For the first year, we were what's called budgeted non-board, meaning Board of County Commissioner employees. So for the first few months, I was technically a county employee, but on the budget. So in the FRS system, in the county's position control number, but all of those costs were reimbursed by the Children's Trust. So that's how they approached it, getting off started, the first interlocal agreement. Then I got hired and I took a look at the interlocal agreement and sat down with the county, and we decided that there's some things that maybe the trust should do right away, and some things that the county didn't need to do. So we made some changes. For example, the website, you're required to have a website by the end of the first year. I said, well, I'll do that. We decided that it was best if the trust had our own relationship with the auditing firm, but pretty much that's the interlocal agreement we had year one. Year two, which is what we're in right now, that's when we started to separate as an organization and become more an independent Children's Services Council, as opposed to tangled in with the county's operations. So we took over all our own budgeting functions, human resource functions, all of the employer relation functions, procurement functions. The only thing we did on the risk management side, we have all our own insurance and liability, for board of directors insurance and general liability insurance, but we do contract back with our county for the benefits, health insurance, dental and vision for our employees. We joined the FRS as our own entity, and we do still contract with the county for IT support. We use the county attorney still, and we also use the still use the county's ERP system. All right. So year 3, this budget that we're putting together right now, we'll be separating from the clerk of the court. So I'm not going to have a CFO, but the clerk of the court said that 3 separate special districts was too much. So we're in the process of procuring all our accounting and auditing and treasury services with a relatively large accounting firm to handle that for us. Nobody else really does it that way. We're the only Children's Services Council thus far. It may not work. I may not like it. May end up trying that for a year and then hiring somebody. But for right now, we're going to try that because it allows for more separation of duties and things to make sure we have all the internal controls that we want to have. And then, so that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm sure every year we'll take a look at legal services. Eventually, we're going to have to do something about that ERP. I hope we never have to get rid of the health insurance because our county is self-insured, and it's quite a bargain. But so that's where we are now. I do want to point out that if I go backwards, and you see all the lines that we lined out, that means that somebody, meaning me and my skeleton staff to start, had to develop all of those policies and processes to take that over. And I have to tell you, that's how I spent most of the first 7 months on the job, frankly.
Mr. Murphy, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
So I'm trying to remember at the beginning of your comments, the voters of Alachua County decided to create the council in November of 2018.
Right.
So the 5 members would have been the elected officials who served sort of waiting for the 5 non-elected officials to be appointed.
That's correct.
Okay. And so February of 2020 is when those 5 were seated.
Correct.
Kudos to our governor for doing it so quickly with us.
Absolutely.
Sidebar. But as it relates to when you were brought in, as you look back between November of 2018, when the voters supported the Children's Services Council, and February of 2020, so roughly 16 months, did the 5 elected officials do anything? And I don't mean that in a negative
Yes.
way, but did they do stuff sort of in anticipation that you would be coming on? Did they advertise for your position?
Yes. So they started, I left it off my timeline, but around June is when they saw the first executive director job description.
Okay.
And I think it hit the street in August or September. I remember applying in September.
Okay.
So they started back in June, meeting with the HR staff. And if you go back and read our minutes, which are on our website, they did kind of divide duties between certain board members. So it was a working board for a few months. So for example, in our case, the school superintendent's the one that met with county HR to draft a job description, for example.
Okay.
And someone else met with the clerk of the court to review the first draft of the budget and finance and investment policies and all of that. So it was a working board for a few months, but we did have, I don't want to discount, we had a tremendous amount of county staff support with that, from the budget office, from the clerk's office, from community support services staffing the meeting. So it made quite a bit of difference. But they also did make, remember, every local context is different. So we had a Children's Services Advisory Board prior to the Children's Trust passing that was established in 2015 by the county commission to kind of practice for a children's trust. And so what the county did is they had some expiring money from some other tax. And they said, look, you guys practice, come up with some recommendations. And then if you do a good job, we'll put this children's trust thing on the ballot. And so we already they had done a 0 to 5 needs assessment, for example. They had come up with some ideas. So we were able to get some quick wins pretty quickly. And many of the people on the old board were potential nominees on the new board. And some were even on we had our superintendent on the Children's Services Advisory Board, for example. We had a judge, we had the DCF person on it. So it wasn't, these people were not coming in cold. So that's kind of how our local context is a little bit different here.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
Of course.
You come in March of 2020 with a lot of work having been done. I mean, just at least the bones of the operation and a needs assessment or a partial needs assessment having been performed since. And then, so that's March of 2020, a little more than a year ago. In your first budgeted year, so you're the executive director in March of 2020. Did you all did you fund any significant programs?
Can I get to that?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's a great question.
Okay.
So let me get back to the local context and the Children's Services Advisory Board. So now I'm giving the county, they didn't do that much. I did do some work. I just want to let you know. So, I mean, when I came in, I was in I basically was in a secretary's office, some leftover space in the county. And they said, before you hire anyone else, you're going to have to find some space. So we're out. And the next month, COVID hit and the world went off a cliff. So that gave me a reprieve. But they did have some programs at the county that the trust wanted to continue. So right off the bat in October, we had 3 early learning initiatives that the trust was going to pick up. And yes, they did go ahead and fund some programs for children ages 6 to 18 right off the bat. So the day I came in, there was a stack of contracts on my desk ready to sign. And the county staff agreed to help me manage those. But ultimately I was responsible. And looking back on that, I would never criticize my board because you just go with the best information you have. I think had they known COVID was going to hit and the world was going to go off a cliff and all of that, they probably would have waited a little bit on that second round of funding. But there was this idea of fairness that if we're going to have some programs 0 to 5, then there was a lot of pressure to give some funding for children ages 6 to 18. Now,
Mr. Murphy, let me interrupt you. I'm going to take a privilege. We're going to declare about a 5 to 10 minute stretch break for comfort. I know it's a little bit early in the meeting, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to take we will come back. It's 2:45. We'll come back at 2:55.
okay.
So we're just going to take 10 minutes. All right. 10 minutes, stretch break, comfort break. I'm stretching. So let me ask you this. You don't have to tell me anything about your experience. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I have.
Courtney?
It's a 10-minute break.
Thank you, Ms. Courtney. Hello, how are you? I did 24 years in our contracting division. Anytime you want write too well, sir.
So maybe I should get some time with James just to kind of go through that. I don't know that we have to move people around at this meeting, but certainly have this conversation. How many more positions that's going to require. And I talked to Governor.
Cheers.
Well,
How are you doing?
nothing that much. Are you kidding? Yeah.
Top of everything.
Yeah.
else, on top of everything else. Moving houses on. Trying to case in Franklin County.
Oh, you know what? No,
Yeah.
you do. Okay, and I
I drive like an old lady. I drive slow.
no, you were just driving along perfectly fine. I'm a fan of those cars. And I look over, I see the front, and I didn't.
My wife hard time about the color of it. All right, let's get started. Sorry about that. All right. Oh, we gotta get.
Okay, we're best friends forever now. Thank you.
So I'm off my blood thinners now, but for a while there, I couldn't go a half an hour, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? You need to bring us back in off of recess officially or have a gavel or how does this work?
So I declared 10 minutes, which would be bring us to 5 minutes from now. But I'll drag him up here. You can talk to him directly. Okay.
Well, no, I think
I'll wait.
I think we all probably need to listen to hear. I just have a question about the timeline, but I can wait. We can wait.
Commissioner Cummings.
Absolutely. Y'all, what time did y'all start your other meeting prior to?
We started at 1:30.
Right, so you haven't had a break in an hour and a half.
It has been a longer meeting before us. It has been a longer meeting for us. Although I'll tell you something, Mr. Sachs knows those bylaws like you would not believe.
Invaluable.
Yeah,
That helped a lot.
yes. I think there's a chairmanship in its
You can't get out of this. I think we've already made this very clear, right?
future. There she is. Commissioner Cummings, with your permission, we'll go ahead and get started 4 minutes early. All right, so we'll reconvene the CSC.
Thank you, Judge.
Superintendent?
So just back to the timeline, the voters passed it in November of 18. In the spring of 19, we're still waiting on the governor. You had the 5 electeds and then waiting on the other 5 from the governor. In August of 19, your position is advertised. They moved forward and started collecting taxes in the fall of 19. And then you come on in March of 20. And you mentioned something about, but you had already funded a 0 to 5 program so that they felt the need to fund a 6 to 18 program. When did the funding of the 0 to 5 program take place?
Started October 1.
Of 19?
Yep.
Okay. While they were just starting to collect money and they did not receive a loan?
No.
How'd you fund something if you didn't have any money?
I don't think they paid them until the money came in. So they just paid them quarterly up
Okay,
until
all right.
that point.
Okay.
Did they not perform basically a review or
Yeah.
audit?
Yep. So let me just back up. I jokingly said that that I had done some things. I had a lot done. Mr. Mitchell is right before I got there. So Michelle Watson had been to Alachua County on behalf of the Florida Children's Council at least twice. I know at least once during the Children's Services Advisory Board, and then again with when the Children's Trust was constituted. And we had one needs assessment with the Children's Services Advisory Board. And then when that was sunsetting and the Children's Council was started, they presented us with a second gap analysis for the county. So, the statute, the way I read the statute is it's your job to assess the needs. It doesn't say it's your job to do a big, huge needs assessment and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. We have taken the approach that needs assessment is a constant thing that we do. So you asked what we did this year. So the result of those 6 to 18 programs is because of COVID, we ended up carrying a lot of those programs into this year because a lot of that money didn't get spent. Does that make you understand what I'm saying? So we carried those forward. And then when we had a pretty good idea that the summer, we thought things would start to open up, we commissioned a needs assessment just around summertime, where we addressed some of the things that I heard in some of the public comments about what were the revenue streams, what were all the programs, how many kids, the funding sources, the locations. And then once that was completed, we made an enormous investment in the summer. We just funded about $1.1 million worth of summer slots, which is about 2,000 children. So
not to put 2 points, why is summer different for those of us who've raised children in Tallahassee? Why did you decide to do a needs assessment for summer? What was the crying need that you saw in Alachua?
Well, there's 3 ways to look at it. One, if you have children, and I have 5, ages 6 to 17, what to do with them in the summer is a big problem. Now, we have some resources, and I have older kids that can watch the younger kids if necessary. But if you don't have that, it's a workforce issue for the parents. It creates all kinds of problems for law enforcement. So there's a lot of reasons there. Plus, when you look at the data, at least in Alachua County, we have some of the largest academic gaps between Black and white students. When you look at 3rd grade reading scores, and all of the literature says that all kids learn in school. But when you look in the summertime, kids with resources can stay flat or even get smarter. Kids that don't fall behind, and that gap continues to grow. And the problem with summer is that there's not very many systems that own summer. You have a school system, a child welfare system, a juvenile justice system. There is no summer system. So that's one area where our funding can make a big, big difference that otherwise wouldn't happen in our community.
So I have a quick,
Sorry, go ahead.
may I ask a question? I apologize. So how do you systematically prioritize the areas that you all want to invest your funds? So it's my understanding that you all didn't do a great big needs assessment. You took the recommendations that your planning committee did. You started funding some of those things. And then as issues come up, you all fund different things. But how do you prioritize what is necessary?
We use the framework of results-based accountability. And so while we didn't pay hundreds of thousands for a big needs assessment in our community, we had first of all, we didn't have this. This is great. By the way, I wish we had something like this in Alachua County. They'll probably want the trust to do something like this. This is terrific. But we had other things kind of like this. We have our health department had just finished their CHIP process. The University of Florida, along with 6 other organizations, had just published a giant study on racial disparity in the county. We had a lot of studies already. So our chair, very wisely, and this happened before I got there, but when I came in, it was my job to finish it and submit the final report. We formed what's called a technical advisory committee that went through all of those existing studies. And we took all of that information and boiled it all down to 4 goals for children. And for us, we keep kids healthy, educated, supported, and safe. And so when we look at each of those areas, when we look at health, we developed key population level indicators. So things like birth weights, there's some others in there. Of course, since you asked me now, I'm failing the quiz, but for education, it's the ones you'd expect. 3rd grade reading rates, graduation rates, and we broke it all out by race. For when it comes to safety, we looked at accidental deaths. We ended up, and we found indicators where in Alachua County, we were either below the state or not going the direction we want to go. So you might pick health, but it might mean something different for you. You know, we had a lot of research that said we have a lot of needs in, for example, oral health for children. There's a big gap there. So we boiled it down to 4 and some key indicators. And then in the results-based accountability model, no single agency or program is responsible for the whole population, but they are responsible for what they do. So that's kind of when your needs assessment comes in. So when you focus on 3rd grade reading, for example, Michelle's team coordinates the entire 3rd grade campaign for grade level reading throughout the state. It has 3 pillars: early learning, attendance, school attendance, and summer. So the evidence says that if you want to impact 3rd grade reading, you look at summer. So that's how we do it. We look at our population indicators, and then we survey the literature as to what might work, what has a reasonable chance of working to get those moving in the right direction. That's how we do it. And we've come up with 4 or 5 strategies in this upcoming budget for under each one of those 4 areas of things that we're gonna focus on.
Mr. Murphy, in terms of setting your priorities and those 4 areas, and you mentioned oral health, and you're right, it's not Alachua County, it's all 67 counties that really struggle with that issue. But in terms of funding a program, in the Medicaid is already funding oral health. It's really just a matter of getting kids to get in a dentist chair. The funding is already provided by the federal government, the state government through ACA and CMS. So did Alachua decide? Did you all decide that the focus was not going to be on funding the oral health, but on helping better educate families on the importance of oral health, the benefits that already existed in the community for kids? I mean, I love the fact that you mentioned oral health. It just so happens to be something I'm familiar with, but again, really getting to the point of how do you prioritize how you're going to spend your neighbor's dollars? How do you prioritize something like oral health?
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions in there. So you brought up the issue of Medicaid and other revenue sources, and I've already heard that in the public comments as well. One of the reasons it's important to have an executive director and some infrastructure is that they should have some subject matter expertise on systems as well. So where I came from in Jacksonville, so before I was in Gainesville, I worked in the Children's Commission, which was really a department of the city there, but that was a much bigger organization. And I led that group through a process of adopting a policy of revenue maximization. So we didn't pay for things that other funders should pay for. And that's part of understanding and knowing systems and where children's services councils fit. So in the case of oral health, we may fund some direct services because Medicaid doesn't necessarily pay for everything a kid may need. But the conversation we're having now around that is we have the University of Florida, which screens every 3rd grader, I think it is, 3rd grader. And then you have a cavity, you need this, you need that, and the kids disappear. So maybe what it is that we need to fund is some pediatric dental navigators or case managers or case coordinators to get those people to services. Yes, because you're right, because our health department, our rural clinics say we do have some funding to take care of these kids, but we can't get them there. So that's just one example. So how much to give to that versus the other thing, that I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, having done this for a while now, there is no magic study that's going to tell you exactly how you should allocate your 9 million or 4.5 million or whatever it is you end up collecting here. A lot of it is boots on the ground, what's already there. And what do we think we can get? In our case, we went after some easy wins. That's what the priority was. the benefit of the funding that the Children's Council did in Alachua County, while it may not have all been as successful as we wanted to the first year, we kind of expected that, but we got some relationships with our agencies. They're used to doing business with us. And we have some stories to tell about some successes, and we know some things that don't work and that we won't do again. So that's how I'd answer that.
Mr. Chairman,
This is tough.
Mr. Murphy, you are like perfect.
It's an active board, Mr. Murphy.
What I would say to the members of the council is, Mr. Murphy brings up such a good point of his background, his experience, and the initiative of revenue maximization, of making sure that the dollars that we're spending, that the appropriate entity is first paying for those. And again, we're not talking about hiring an executive director precisely today, but I would encourage all the members to keep that in the back of their memory bank as we do consider applicants, that someone with Mr. Murphy's, and I know he's perfectly happy in Alachua County. I don't know how, but he is. So I'm not enlisting his
Go
services,
Gators.
but go Knowles. But I do think it's an incredibly important skill set that you brought to the job, sir.
And maybe we can get you to turn now to building that infrastructure, to answering some of these
Yes.
questions, to helping us to develop consensus. What are we looking for in an executive director? What are we looking for in those, the things that we've got to do with more speed probably than many of us are even comfortable with?
Yeah, so I don't know if you care about this or not, but this is what my organization looks like now. Of course, you have the citizens and the board, and the green are things that we contract out, and the blue are people that work with me. So I told you about the county attorney and the auditor, and along with me, those are really services or employees of the board. So it's your attorney, it's your auditor. And then I have an executive assistant / clerk. That person, preparing for board meetings is a lot of work. When I was the only employee, I don't know about you, but it took me like 2 days once for one board meeting. Have you had that experience? And the other thing is you want to make sure your executive director has the benefit of Michelle and all of the other children's services councils, because they've been tremendously helpful. So when you do collect money, that first check you want to stroke is probably to the Florida Children's Council and sign up right away. How's that for the plug? Michelle told me to say that at breakfast today. So anyways, and then I have, that executive assistant was the first person I hired. And it took us a while to get going, but then I had a fiscal assistant. So I hired them shortly after, and they took over responsibilities of paying all the bills that the county was helping me with. And then I have a director of program operations. She's a FAMU person, and she's from Tallahassee. She used to be the executive director of Healthy Start here, but I'm glad she lives in Gainesville now. And she basically runs the programmatic part of the organization. So once we decide what we want to fund, and when we go to implement this year's budget, she'll develop the solicitations. Her team will make sure we have the reviewers, handle all the contracting, all of that. So I have 2 contract managers that work with her, as well as we actually got some funding from the Pritzker Children's Initiative in Alachua County, which is another reason why we were ready to invest in some early learning programs right away. But I have someone that on a systems level just coordinates with all of the other early learning initiatives and organizations in the county. So it's her job to tell me what is the other funding out there? Where is all this CARES money going? What do we need to take a look at? What do we need to stay away from? Where are the gaps? And I'm in the process of hiring someone that just does community engagement. And then my last hire, because it's probably one of the most important, is we'll work with Christy, is a research planning and evaluation manager. So these questions of data, needs assessment, studies, literature reviews, that person will be responsible for coordinating all of that.
What % of your revenue line coming in from your taxes actually goes to administrative costs? Do you have that up there?
Yes, I do. It's a few slides away. There's 2 ways to look at our budget, okay? So by function and object, and our budget is, and if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But when you look at it by object here, personnel services, you see our total proposed budget this year is about 10 million. Not all of that's tax revenue. Some of that is some transfers and fund balance from the previous year. And we'll spend about $1 million in personnel services right there. Okay. Now, when you look at it, administration versus programs, this is at the functional level. Programs is about 7.4 million. Administration is about 1 million. And then we have other uses over 700,000. The other uses is mostly we're putting away, we rent a building now. We're putting away to either purchase that one or purchase another one. I know supposedly no one's coming back to work, but we need a place to work and we need a place to have board meetings and community meetings and things like that. So that's how our budget is sliced and diced right now.
So I'm sorry, your revenue is 7 point what?
We're budgeting about 7 point, where is it up there? Oh, there's no revenues on here. I'm sorry.
There, 7.9.
Here it is. Yeah, we're budgeting 7.9 in ad valorem taxes for this year, which is a little bit more than last year. And I think it's in the statute somewhere that you have to budget at 95. Maybe that's our policies. You never budget at 100%. So I think our tax levy is about 8.3 million and we budgeted about 95% of that.
And you said your personnel costs were 1.2?
No, my personnel services is 1.05 down there under the expenditures. I don't know if you can see it.
Mr. Murphy, do you have budget flexibility in your expenditures, or are you held to a cap on your executives or your salary operations?
Well, we have a whole set of policies. And so in the budgetary view right here, we have flexibility at the object level. So if I want to move money around in personnel services or in operations or capital outlay, or even within grants and aid, I can do it within those. But if I want to take money from salaries and move it down to grants and aid, then I would need board approval. And that's in our policies.
Thank you.
All right. And go ahead, Commissioner Cummings. Sorry.
Yes, sir. Did you all set your initial millage rate at the max, or was it some percentage less than the 0.5?
We set it at the max. They set it, the trust board set it at the max. I wasn't there, but it was, from what I recall, listened to the meetings, read the minutes. It was definitely a discussed issue. We had some key community activists that were involved in running and pushing the campaign. And they were very adamant in their public comments that the trust should set the max in case it really wanted to do something big in the first few years. I don't think anyone has expected us to be able to give out every dollar the first few years. But in talking with my colleagues, with Michelle's help around the state, I have been surprised. For example, Palm Beach has never, even in the recession during the financial crisis, they never had to cut agencies because they were able to draw down on some previous fund balances. So I think our board wants to make sure, at least so far, that we have enough to do what we need to do, and that should the economy go like this, that we have a little bit of cushion.
Thank you so much. And I know that you sent us these slides, and I can't remember, did we ship out the slides to all of the other council members? So we'll send all of Mr. Murphy's slides to everybody because it's a little hard to read from.
Judge, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Not to put you on the spot, but I really appreciate the experience that you're bringing. My question to you, sir, are what are the top 3 skill sets that you think are most critical for you to do your job effectively? So if you were in our shoes, having to hire someone in your position, what are the 3 critical things we should be looking for?
Well, I'm gonna punt a little bit. I'm gonna tell you my skill sets and which I've had to draw on. So most of my life, I was in the private sector, and I was actually a one-man show. I was in the school fundraising business. There's people here that don't, everywhere I go, there's a school board member or a principal or superintendent that doesn't remember they were a customer of mine, but I basically ran $1 million something out of my garage, and you had to do everything yourself. And then I met John Heyman in Jacksonville. And when he got the job at the Children's Commission, somehow he convinced me to go work with him. and to be the director of operations. And I said, well, I'm completely unqualified and don't know what I'm doing, so I'm a perfect choice. But it was the best experience I've ever had. And I learned most of what I know now. Then I went back to school. I worked at a nonprofit for a year and a half where I traveled all throughout the state, including here. For a while, I supervised for a short time the staff that runs the community schools for Children's Home Society. So I've been to Sable Palm and seen the medical clinic right next door and all of that. And it's really great what you have to build on here. And then I got hired to do this. So I'd had nonprofit, private, and government experience. And really the last year, the skill set I had to draw on the most was those days when I was working out of my garage, having to get everything organized by myself, frankly. So I don't have the perfect skill set. You will meet, if you ever get to meet the other executive directors, they're all different. I've had the privilege of connecting with all of them. So I'm not sure there's one thing. There's just, I don't know. You definitely have to be self-motivated. And I'm sure that anyone you interview would be. I'll also say that I was surprised knowing what I know of Gainesville. Now I'm very glad I was selected, but I was surprised I was selected because I wasn't from there. And so they took a chance on me and I took a chance on them. And so far it's working pretty well. I feel really privileged, but those are the skill sets I had. I think I also benefited from working in a big organization and being able to draw on some of those experiences.
That's great. And then one other really quick piggyback part number 2. So sitting in the position where we are as a newly established children's council, what in your opinion are the top 3 things that we should be doing right now?
I'm glad you asked. I wasn't going to give any comments unless someone asked me, but I know you're negotiating your interlocal agreement. And so I think my view is that a lot of people are going to come up here and tell you what you all should be doing. But really, you all are not going to do it because you have other things you do during the day. So you do need a staff person, at least one. And, when I look at the time frame, you might want to consider starting your executive director search pretty quickly. Number 1. Number 2 is if you're going to negotiate with the county, you might want to ask them, please give you someone that can handle the financial stuff, opening your bank account, delegating some authority to do that, and putting together a budget. This would be our budget. That's about the level of detail we need per our policies to get some policies done to do that so that you can trim by October 1st and get some revenue and then get started. I probably would not. Someone said, be cautious. I don't know who said this. Maybe I'm making it up, but I know everyone's going to want you to fund programs, or there will be people to fund programs right away. I think I kind of agree with people that, so when I got there, I said, what did you do when you get there? This summer thing is the first new thing we've done since I got there. So that was almost a year. And what I told the board is, well, can you please let me kind of figure out, manage what we've already done? Because we had $3 million in funding. So we can do this next round the way we want to do it. And most of our funding for this next round is coaching agencies how to do business with us, how to give us the data we need, how to make sure they're following all of the laws in the state, all of that stuff. And so I would focus on the infrastructure part. Get some help getting your budget done, try to go to trim, hire executive director, and give them a little bit of time to determine. You should ask them, do they have enough information to make recommendations, or do you need to spend some more money on a needs assessment or something in between? And let them start taking some of this work off you. Because if you hire a subject matter expert in how to run something like this, they should be able to help you do that.
And on that same, were you finished?
I'm done. Thank you.
On that same topic, could you please discuss I'll be perfectly candid, being on a board is new to me. Can you discuss the role of the board versus the role of staff in the kind of infrastructure that you think is most effective?
Yes. I think everyone knows, I would guess that you'd hear people say your job is policy and the staff implements. And so I will say that since some of the people in Alachua County came from the Children's Services Advisory Board, where they were advisory and their job was to be sort of a think tank for the county, some people were in mourning actually after the high of the passage of the Children's Trust, because now those policy decisions were being delegated to a board and implemented by staff, right? And so the challenge we have as staff is now that we're expected, at least that's what we thought we were expected to do, to make recommendations based on the needs and all that is who now in the community needs to be, who makes the decisions? Of course, that's all of you. Who needs to be asked for advice? Who needs to be consulted? Who needs to be heard? Kind of the stakeholder analysis, because after the trust was constituted, people's roles changed a little bit. And I think the gentleman that said youth, you need to hear from youth. I think that's exactly right. Where I came from, we had a youth council, but staffing it is hard. That's why you need a staff. So if you want to hear from youth, you got to have your staff, and usually the engagement people take care of it. So I think it's very important to get to trim, get your budget, get an executive director, and let them put the staff in place to do all the things that you want to do.
Mr. Murphy? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So did we totally blow up your presentation or?
No.
All right, good. You mentioned earlier we talked about interlocal agreements. Do you have a list of agencies like the school district, Electric County School District, that you all have interlocal agreements with? Do y'all have official agreements with the county, the school district, Early Learning Coalition, and other agencies and other groups about your way of work or not?
That's a great question. So you know that you cannot fund the school district, right? So you can't have a contract. Okay. So where I came from, we had agreements with the district around data sharing for programs and all of that. We don't have any of that yet. And the reason is because I'm still hiring that one last person that's going to do all that for me, that researcher. Now, I am still, I've contracted out a lot of my research to independent people to do some of that for me now. So I've relied on a lot of contractors, but that person will handle those kind of agreements or MOUs. So no, we should have those. We don't yet. And we're realizing that as one of the members of the public said, as we're kind of funding things that other people aren't funding, but they do it too. We do need some written agreements to delineate the lines of responsibility. Again, that's all part of building your structure and your infrastructure.
And just out of curiosity, you mentioned y'all had been practicing for 4 years, from 2015 to 2019. Basically, you had a group that was assigned, probably not unlike our group, that did a lot of research and had a lot of people presenting to them. And I'm just interested in October of 19, what was the first, that 0 to 5 thing that you funded? What was it?
Well, that is on my presentation. And let's see. And this is actually where the benefit of the other children's councils really benefited Alachua County, because we built on the research in both Martin and St. Lucie County. But we have a problem in Alachua County of numbers that aren't going the right way around infant deaths. And one cause of infant deaths is birth weights. But another cause is just other things that happen afterwards that you just may not know about, or problems in the home. So we have had a strategy of trying to get to people sooner in the process to prevent bad from happening. And I would say if we're funding programs, we lean heavily towards prevention. A lot of the services where you can fund maybe what the state already does, a lot of times are an intervention type program. So we look to prevent as much as possible. So we funded a nurse home visiting program. We have about 2,500 births approximately every year in our county. And every mother is entitled to a visit from a registered nurse if she wants it. And so this is one area where we probably do need some agreements. We have an agency that manages this. And so it's their job to be co-located in the hospitals, to meet the new moms, to schedule the visits. But we had to get, and this happened before there was even a children's trust, we had to get the hospitals to agree to let these people co-locate there. And right now it's kind of done on a handshake, but if we're going to continue to fund that, we were just talking the other day, we probably better memorialize this some way, because they might decide for some reasons that hospitals decide that they don't want it anymore. We hope not. But this program is very well received, because when we look at prevention, we look at universal, and this is a universal intervention. It's available to everybody. Our summer, I'll call it prevention, is more targeted. We targeted specific groups of children, mainly based on income in areas of town. Then we have we are providing, for example, some funding to our community school that we would call that a place-based initiative where we're meeting children right where we're at. So the very first thing we funded was a universal program that benefited everybody. It was in 0 to 5 because that had been our community's priority. And there had been a lot of pre-work done before a trust was even constituted on how it would work.
Funny, have we had the conversation around that very thing about visits with our previous council? And just one final question, Mark. The 26 sites, do you partner with the school district? Are those school sites or are they not school sites?
Some are school sites and some are not.
Okay, thank you.
Recognizing that these can be long plays, clearly as you identify your programs and implement them, you have some defined measures of success. Have you identified what those metrics are and what you would anticipate achieving over a period of time?
Yes, ultimately in the summer, we would hope to play a part in preventing summer skill loss. Now that's hard because where I came from, I had the benefit of participating in a randomized controlled trial around summer funded by the Wallace Foundation. We don't have that in Alachua County, but what we were able to learn is that it takes very specific types of activities, for example, around the areas of reading, to have kids either not lose or gain, right? So to do that, you need a lot of professional development of the people delivering the services. Like I said, we're just getting started. So this year, yes, we have very specific measures around attendance. And believe it or not, that is a hard thing for some agencies to track the way we want them to track it if you've never done it before, because we collect demographic information on every child. We collect their school ID so we can later match it with other data in case we want to study. So that I would call that a how much, how many kids are going to show up. We're going to track their attendance rates. So what percentage of the time did they show up? And that's an indicator of program quality. And for this year on the better offs, the changes of behavior, the impacts of the program, this year it's very low stress, low key. It'll be survey data on satisfaction. Now that's not where we want to be ultimately, but this is year one. And we have to get used to ourselves collecting this data and analyzing it and getting our agencies used to giving it to us. Now, the way we structured our contracts is we went to a deliverable-based contracting system to where, you have to deliver the service, prove it, send in your financial stuff, and then we click and you get paid. And if you miss any one of those, you're not going to be able to get reimbursed until we get all the information.
Mr. Murphy, quick question. Mine is about the physical footprint or the structure that you've built. Not real good with colors, a little colorblind. I think I counted 8 to 9 in your staffing.
10.
10. From where you began to where you are today, did you think about a longer term physical footprint look, or did you start out, you said you were in an office, but you had to expand, I would imagine. I see you have an operating budget. Are you accessible to the public? Do you have conference space in your location? Are you co-located with the county? Are you separate? Could you talk a little bit about just the physical look?
So when I started, I borrowed an office from the county. And then there's our office right there, that building. That's the building where we rent the first floor. And with the cubicles, it is barely big enough for the 10 that we'll have. So there's no conference room, there's no meeting with providers. And right now we hold our board meetings. Our dais, our county commission dais isn't big enough for the board. We actually hold them at the Cade Museum, which is a children's museum in town. So and it's a great location. It just has a nice feel, a kid's feel, and instead of having a meeting at the courthouse. But so it's worked for us so far. We're going to rent the second floor, and the second floor will give us that community space. We'll be able to have tables, training on how to do, we'll have a conference room for our staff. And then if that works, maybe we'll buy that building, maybe we'll buy another one, but that's kind of been our plan. So we'll have 2 years downstairs. We'll try the upstairs, see how that works, and then decide from there.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I was wondering about, when I think about the long play for being here at the very beginning and trying to think very long term, are you funding primarily nonprofits, or are you doing any incentive seed monies, businesses to get them to think about childcare, or do you do any prize money out there to get folks to do innovative thinking, or is it just RFPs to nonprofits?
That's a great question. obviously, one of the reasons why Children's Services Councils fund nonprofits is a lot of times they're the ones involved in the campaign and have the biggest vested interest in the funding, and they're the ones that will come to the meetings and lobby the board members and all of that. Now, in our summer program, we open that up to anybody. So we do have some for-profits, we have not-for-profits, we have some other governments, we have some colleges. As far as what you're saying, what we proposed in the budget for this year is our community foundation has a Reimagine Gainesville Fund. And I'm not sure exactly what they had in mind. I'm sure most of the people applying will be nonprofits, but it is for that purpose, innovation, new ideas. It has an advisory group and it shepherds new ideas through this process so they can get more funding sometime in the future. So our staff proposal was that we participate in that. And right now the city of Gainesville and the University of Florida fund that. So we would be the third funder, and private people can also make donations. Some of the other stuff, what you're saying is seed money and experiment and all that. When you look at, Michelle can connect you with Miami. They do that. They have a portion every year. They also have a portion that they divvy out to universities to study, and then they're required to publish what they find, and maybe the trust will fund it later. We're not there yet, but it is on our radar.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Tremendous information. Any other questions for Mr. Murphy? Mr. Murphy, thank you very much.
Thank you, and we look forward to your membership in the Florida Children's Council.
All right.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, so that's going to bring us, we're probably going to come back to the interlocal agreement here in just a minute, but let's turn to the status update on the bylaws. Your bylaws committee met. Some of you probably saw a fair amount of the meeting. What we basically did was combine the Alachua with the Escambia. I foolishly didn't really remember that Mr. Sox had written the Escambia bylaws, so we should have started with them. But Dr. Glenn, Commissioner Cummings, Mr. Sox and I basically combined those, and what we're going to propose is bring those back. We're not going to have another bylaws committee meeting unless anybody feels like we absolutely need to have another bylaws. They're not complicated. And we're going to bring those back at the next meeting, a final draft that hopefully we can approve at our next meeting. Dr. Glenn, anything else about bylaws? Commissioner Cummings? Mr. Sox? All right.
And Judge, you're going to send those to us ahead of time, though.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. Hopefully well ahead of time.
yeah. I'm not that fast of a reader.
Yes.
According to our bylaws, you'll
Might
get
need
them
to
at
go to
least
summer
7
fun.
days before.
Is that right? Good.
Our proposed bylaws.
Yes.
Proposed bylaws. Not bylaws until the council votes on. Budget discussion. So the budget discussion and the interim executive director discussion are really the same thing, I
The
think.
agenda has the trim as the next item.
Oh, trim, truth and millage. Look at that. I skipped right over the single most important thing on our budget. I mean, on our agenda. So if you will go in your package, Jessica, can you help me find?
It's about 2/3 of the way through, sir. You're looking for item number 7.
Thank you very much.
That gives you a, well, right, it's page 8, but it's really,
So a couple of things. After we had our last meeting, and Mr. Akinyemi and his staff addressed us, the first thing that we have to decide is do we tell Mr. Akinyemi that the board is expressing the intent to levy ad valorem taxes in 2020. And I thought from that presentation, that was the only thing that we needed to inform him of by by June 1st. But there is another issue, which is there's some exemptions. And we have some flexibility on the exemptions, if I'm following correctly, and that is, Jessica, help me find the page with the, or Elizabeth, help me find the page. So if you go, there should be a spreadsheet entitled applicable to taxes levied. Did everybody see that?
This one?
That's the one, yes. And what it boils down to, and this is something I found out about, I'll be perfectly candid, this morning, is that there is sprinkled throughout the statutes various exemptions. And what this spreadsheet is each of the individual taxing authorities, and then down the left side is all of the various exemptions that may or may not apply. And then throughout, under each taxing authority, you can see what each one of the taxing authorities has done. The way I understand this is, and I suspect people on the school board understand this quite a bit better than I do. What we actually have to do is tell the tax assessor yes or no, and they will assume the Northwest Florida Water Management, that we would have the same exemptions that the Northwest Florida Water Management District would use, because they're the only other special district that uses the exemptions according to the tax assessor. So I bring this up just to tell you, we're doing things very, very quickly, and we're learning as we go. And I just want to be perfectly candid that this is a process this was not something that I was expecting us to need to decide today. And my understanding is that the tax assessors, if we tell them yes or no, they are going to assume until we tell them differently that we would use the same exemption structure that the Water Management District would use. Does this make sense to anyone else on the board?
Yes.
All right, everyone's following. All right, so
Can I make a motion that we instruct the property appraiser to move forward with establishing tax return council beginning this fall at 0.5 mils?
all right, well, now we're in a territory that I cannot participate in. The at 0.5 mils part of it. I can't participate in that because I'm the judge. So what I would do is turn it over to our vice chair to preside at this moment. Welcome aboard, vice chair.
So, and with the motion and a second on the floor, at least for discussion purposes, we're sort of, we're jumping right in. If I understand the motion correctly, you want a max. You want full max, regardless of, and with the understanding that that money would just roll over from year to year. So if you're a taxpayer in this county, what we're saying is we have, there's an enormous amount of additional resources coming into the county. And we are also going to ask the taxpayers, the property owners, to, on top of that, add more to the full max of the millage rate.
Yeah, I think in November, taxpayers spoke clearly to us about their wishes in forming this council and the importance it's going to play in our. And I think they understand, they fully understand the financial obligation that's going to come with that vote.
I would agree with that. And this is something I know we discussed at great length last time, and I was interested to hear Mr. Murphy say that all of the children's service accounts for the majority, it sounded like, levied that full mill the first time around. And I like to think of it as not that we're asking for this money. We're showing our community that we're going to start making a difference in children's lives, and we're going to do it now, because that's what you elected this council to do. So it is moving fast, but I think we have been provided so much already between what the planning committee did, what Whole Child Leon has done. We know the need is there. And I like the cushion knowing that those funds will come in October. That doesn't mean we have to spend all 8 million in this first year. If we need to spend 4 and roll over 4, so then we have 8, 9, 10, 11, I'll never do public math. And then we have 12 the following year, we know what programs we can fund. And I also just want to touch on something Mr. Murphy talked about a minute ago. The agencies that we have in this community and the nonprofits that we share amongst us, they are professionals at this. They know what they're doing. And they're also used to receiving state funding, federal funding, community funding, and keeping those streams separately. And they know how to absorb that funding and then expand their programs. So we have preschool, let's say we have early learning programs. Right now, because of funding, they're only able to serve 100 kids in our community. There are thousands of kids that need that early learning commitment in the summer especially. I love that he touched on that too, as something I hadn't even thought of. But this funding will enable those people who are already the experts at it to get ready to expand their programs and to do it now.
So I have a question on time, because we are stewards of the community's resources, at least that are dedicated to this particular function. And I think that they expect us to act wisely. A lot of it ties to timing, because just because you can spend it doesn't mean you should. I think we need to identify programs that are going to make a difference and that we can measure the difference and that things will have a long-term impact. So I would like to get some sense as to what is the timing on a full comprehensive needs assessment. And from that, we have to hire staff, all of that. That's going to come certainly in the first 6 to 8 months, I would hope, that we get at least some base staff in place. But from there, programmatically, how quickly are we going to roll out programs? I think we need to identify what those programs are, how we roll them out. I would question the value of stockpiling money if we don't anticipate all those programs are going to roll out in the first year or even the second year for that matter. We could, but if they pile up, then do you advance of the year, then cut back? That's a concern, because I don't think starting programs and reducing programs is necessarily a good thing, unless they're one-time events. But when you talked about children, rarely are anything one-time events. So my question would be, what do we think the timing is for a needs assessment, and with that, the timing for basically rolling programs out? I'm not convinced we need
In my mind, you can't spend money unless you raise money. You can't raise money
I'm not
unless you
saying we
take
don't
this action.
ask for
But just
something. I do think
because you raise money doesn't mean you have to spend the money.
And just so you know, at the previous meeting, the only thing that we have to decide on at this meeting is to whether or not we want to let the property appraiser know that we are interested in being included. That's it. It isn't setting a specific amount. So while I am incredibly supportive of the first portion of your motion, I am not supportive of maxing it out when we haven't looked at anything, not one single thing. I don't know. I mean, I know what some executive directors around the state make. This isn't a matter of just being entrusted by the people of Leon County with finding good programs for kids. It's being entrusted with their dollars. And I am going to take that incredibly seriously. And listen, I'd have no problem being outvoted 9-1. I'm not prepared to vote on something like that. And I appreciate your position, Superintendent, but I can't vote yes. I haven't seen one single penny budgeted, nothing. So I'm A-okay in letting the property appraiser know we're all for it. We want to be included in the trim. And then I think we have another
We have until
45
August 5th.
days.
August 5th is the deadline she gave us.
Yeah, that we have to give them a set amount. And again, we might get to the full 0.5. I'm not saying I would be against it,
When I think
I'm just not
Alachua showed the
supportive of it
precedent that's
today.
already there, that they went after 0.5 from the very
I think
beginning.
that's great. I'm not Alachua County. And by the way, I think, again, the people of Alachua County, they entrusted those people. While I have loved the information he provided, that doesn't make me comfortable without having seen anything. And the other thing, final point I'll make is we're in a little different position. Ms. Strickland points out the importance of early learning. The Office of Early Learning at the Department of Education is about to receive $4.5 billion with a B dollars that they've never seen before. That's coming down from the federal government right now. 4.5 billion. I don't know what portion Leon County's getting, but again, before I go out and say to my neighbors and my neighbors' neighbors and their neighbors, hey, I want some of your money because we may be able to use it in the future. I want to know all the money that's out there. And that's the only point I'm making is I am all for letting them know we want this. I just I'm not prepared to vote on a dollar amount or a millage rate amount.
I'd like to help with the discussion if I can. In looking at the bylaws, the proposed bylaws, there's a section on budgeting. And in it, it says the trust shall, in addition, compute a proposed millage rate within the 1/2 mil cap approved by the electorate necessary to fund the tentative budget. So you're supposed to approve the cap necessary to fund your budget, which means as a group, we should have a budget that needs to be funded. We don't have a budget. So I agree with the sort of the step of this is about, do we go for millage versus do we go for an amount of millage? And let's have the budget fully discussed and talk about what the potential is and then see what millage rate we need to fund it. Understanding that we probably shouldn't prepare a budget in excess of a 1/2 mil. Because then we could never fund it.
Yeah, I would rather us inform the appropriate parties that we would like to implement some rate in October, because I don't feel it's appropriate for us to borrow from the county only to catch up. But I agree that we need to figure out at least what that amount should be in advance of actually coming to rate.
I agree with that. And then 2 points of information. One is I happen to know that a number of the Children's Services Councils actually did not do the full rate. So we're on startup. So, Michelle could probably be, I don't know if she's still in the room, but we could have a presentation on that perhaps the next time, because there were decisions made at startup that were different, and what that rationale was and why is probably important for this board to know. And to lean in on what you're saying about the $2 billion, I think it is, that's coming down for childcare. It's not just childcare. The amount of federal dollars coming down because of COVID relief is amazing. And so we may have to flip some of our thinking because of that, right? So where are those gaps going to be? A lot of money is coming for childcare. Very little is coming for low-income parents. So maybe that's a strategy that we're going to be looking at. It's a little different than the other commissions have looked at. But I think we're going to need to have some policy discussions and really understand that federal flow of money before we can make, those big decisions. So I just kind of want to lean in on, let's maybe pace ourselves and take the millage out now and have that as a conversation a little bit later.
Okay, thank you. I wholeheartedly agree. I believe that by June 1st, what we do have to let them know is yes or no. And I think we are agreeing to say yes to that. But I've not even had a chance to all I know is it's a blue book, so I want to have an opportunity to read through this. I would like to have a better understanding of what the needs are and what a budget would require for us to fill that need, for us to be able to set that millage rate. So I'm in complete agreement. Let's say, yes, we know we want to assess one. We have until August 5th to determine what that budget would be and how we want to be in action on that. We have a little bit of time. Let's use that time to do our research, do our legwork, and then be able to intelligently say, we know this is the amount of money that we're going to need for the first year. So I just wanted to piggyback on that. It's exactly how I feel.
Can I make one point? Just one thinking about it, and I hear what everybody's saying. I think this is why we work as a group together. Everybody's different opinion coming from different. I know Superintendent and I are both passionate about the needs we see with our kids because we see it every day Carmen sees it every day. So he lives it, we breathe it, we know it's there. We don't need a needs assessment to tell us that, but I completely understand that we need to prove to our public we're doing our due diligence. One thing I do want to touch on though, the excess of funds is a great opportunity, and I love the dental example. Let's say there was a group that wanted to provide mobile dental care to our schools. That excess of funding could be earmarked for, not for capacity building and not for programming, but for tangible assets for an agency to purchase to be able to provide that. So where they may have that extra cost year one, and those funds are available for us. So the dental, the dental program applies for, $500,000, and 100 of that goes into the mobile, and then it's only 400 a year they apply for after that. So that might provide us an opportunity for some of these people to get some startup that year with that first year with a little extra.
Commissioner Cummings? Oh, thank you. Not to be redundant, however, Madam Vice Chair, I agree that this should be a bifurcated process. And I am prepared, today to vote on the first part of the superintendent's motion. But I believe that we do need to engage in some type of due diligence before we decide on the millage rate. I think some semblance of a budget would certainly be helpful. After all, we are here representing our constituents, and we have to show that we are good stewards. And we can't be good stewards if we don't have the information that we can absorb and recognize that's what's best for our children. But I also don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we're fortunate to have individuals on this council that were part of the planning committee. They studied the situations in Leon County as it relates to our children. They studied the needs assessments. And we have that report, which is over 100 pages. They interviewed individuals that are familiar with the needs of our children. They looked at other children's services councils. So we're not necessarily in the dark. I believe we have a starting point. This, I understand, is a great summary of the needs of our children in Leon County. So I just believe that we need to just do our due diligence, take a little time before we take that next step. So I'm prepared, as I said, to vote on the superintendent's, the first part of his motion.
So then, listening to the will of the board, then let me amend my motion to not include the second part of the 0.5 mils, just to include our intentions to let the property appraiser know that we want to move forward, and we'll get to him by August is exactly what that millage rate will be, that recommendation.
Look at that.
All right, so now I think I am allowed to participate in that part. It's not setting the rate that I'm forbidden by statute from participating.
Okay.
And I warned everybody there was good reasons the judge should not be the chair.
Exactly why you should be chair, Judge.
So there is a motion and a second. Any further discussion,
I have one request to that.
please?
So not to belabor the vote, because I'm completely in agreement with that. But I do want to make sure that for those of us that did not have the privilege of being on the committee, and I completely agree, that there is some type of summary that we can be able to evaluate what the results of the needs assessment that was previously done, a cheat sheet version, so that we get a clear understanding of that. Also a summary of this, which I intend to read over the weekend, but just some information to educate the rest of us as to where we are with what the needs are. Go ahead.
Yes,
What a
ma'am.
potential budget may be.
So two things.
Yes.
I will, at the very beginning, I forwarded links to it, and there's an executive summary that's useful, but we will re-forward that to everybody, the executive summary and the full report of the planning committee. The other thing that we need to get to everybody, before the planning committee was constituted, county staff, and the planning committee's report is this gigantic report, but county staff did a report that's 10 times in terms of just raw data of what the planning committee did. We'll need to update that and feel comfortable with it, but I want to get both of those reports to the council members, and we will do that tomorrow.
Thank you.
We'll get that done tomorrow. Jessica's not making eye contact.
And I will say that I did have the advantage of serving on that committee for 2 years. So but you certainly respect and value your opinion and judgment on this matter. And made the
So
revised motion.
if it's acceptable, the way I understand is that the board would be authorizing the chair to give a formal notice that the council intends to levy property taxes in 2020. Is that the sense of the motion?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any other discussion, Mr. Brown? And any objection? All right, we'll show him that the motion passes unanimously. Okay. I had to, so I'm just going to say, take a little bit of a privilege. What a privilege it is to work with you. People who are here and taking this so seriously and bring so much experience. What a privilege. Can't believe it. Next is budget discussion, and I'm going to be perfectly candid. The budget discussion, and I think the interim executive director are about the exact same thing, except that I think what I'm going to ask you to do is authorize me to work with county staff and come up with a proposed budget, and then getting to the interim executive, a proposed infrastructure budget. And then the second half of the budget will be the programmatic budget, which is going to be just a big, the difference between the infrastructure budget and whatever the maximum millage rate is, and the county, and that's going to be what's left for the board to figure out what that part of the budget is. Because I don't think it's appropriate for me to be proposing a budget for the actual work of the council, other than standing the council up, building the infrastructure.
I so
So-
move, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
No, I so move.
Did you so move?
Mhm.
All right. Mr. Sachs, did you want to
I
discuss?
didn't want a second. Is there a second?
I'm not sure I understand what the motion is.
The motion is for me to go and get work with county staff to bring back for the next meeting a proposed budget.
Okay.
Yes.
And the budget is going to, and the substance of the budget is going to be the staff, technology, space, whatever basic infrastructure resources we need, so that I can get out of the business of trying to be an operator as opposed to being the chairman of a board. I am not going to bring you back a proposed budget for programs. So
That's it. The operational is what you would do, not programmatic.
yeah. So there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Just one moment. So maybe, and I may have missed this in the first meeting, our budgeting or fiscal year, is it July 1 to June 30th? Is it January 1 to December 31st, or what is the?
Help me out, Mr. Sox.
It's in here.
October 1 through September.
County
30th.
is October, September.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
October,
Oh,
September.
the counties is, but
October.
Yeah, and there was
Yeah,
the woman from the
October,
property
September.
appraiser's office that she said that I guess early taxes start rolling in at the beginning of November. That's when we would see we decided we're doing it, so that's when we would see the first dollars coming in.
And expenditures prior to that, if we were to get a letter of credit or something in place from the county, we could use that as the funding model until those revenues come in. My discussion item is that in the preparation of the draft bylaws, there is already a reference to a budget planning committee. And I would suggest that at the delivery of the operational side of the budget, the admin side of the budget, that we then create from this board a budget planning committee that meets and structures the budget and comes back with that structure to the full board, as opposed to having us try to work through a budget, have a formal budget planning committee that bylaws already present, and maybe elect that either today or in the next meeting.
Instead of me trying to bring back a budget for
No,
our next meeting.
do that piece,
We'll do
because
that,
the
but
county
might
would
as-
have that
do that
role,
next time.
but as the beginning element of that planning committee, that could be
And,
their takeoff
Do
point.
that at the next meeting.
yeah,
Go for it at the next meeting.
Because we have some folks on the board that might be really interested in participating on a budget committee, and that would be better than the whole board try to do it in a meeting.
For discussion purposes, one of the things as you're doing the budget that, we brought up at the last meeting, and I'd like to kind of underscore is, I think it might be important to bring on an administrative executive initially, not an interim CEO as it's labeled here, just because having chaired many nom and gov committees, I don't think you want to work that fast to get an executive director on.
Oh,
I think it makes way more sense to get an administrative person on who can help with all the logistics that you're going to need, the filing with the state, setting these things up, and then take our time and really find a great executive director. If you call the person interim executive director, I've seen this happen a million times, 85% of the time they get the job. Just because they've been doing it doesn't really mean they're the best person. Sorry to people who have not been in that role before, but
so tell me, so are you suggesting,
I'm suggesting that as you come back with the budget, that we look at an interim administrative person as soon as
That's the
possible.
operational.
And that operational, and that we give ourselves a little bit of time for that
Absolutely.
executive director to really do an appropriate type of search, because I think, as we saw, it may not be somebody from this community. So we want to do that well.
And a
It may be
Scambia
just semantics, just changing the
Yeah.
title from interim
Thank
executive
you.
director to interim administrative.
Administrator.
yeah, and honestly, I think that's what
Someone.
We-
Somebody.
In a
Well, I
Scambia, we
do
use the
think it's
title interim
Important that the
administrator.
person not think they're going to be the executive director.
That's what I'm
if it's
saying,
an
just take
administrative,
that title off.
And one of their explicit responsibilities being to establish the search for the executive.
Correct.
So, yeah, all right. I think we're all on the same page. So there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing none, any objection? All right, so the motion carries unanimously, and I will work with county staff to try and bring you a proposed budget to work through understanding. And then that brings us to the,
Judge,
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry, if I might make a point of, it really had nothing to do with the motion, so I don't want to bring it up in the middle of that, but as a point of interest, and I don't know if this is possible, because the county is on October, September, but most agencies run on a July to June, and most school programs run July to June. It wreaks havoc with agencies' budgets to have funding that is set through from October to September. I'm just going to throw that. I don't know if that's solvable, but to have a grant that's issued for that timeline that then dissipates in the middle of a school year or of a program, and obviously this is not healthcare related, but as for early learning, it does create a little bit of a financial dilemma for agencies.
and I'm looking for because it's in the bylaws.
Yeah, it is
It's already
October to
set.
September.
It's already set.
No, it's not already
Well,
set,
right,
but
they haven't
we're,
been adopted.
because we haven't adopted the bylaws yet.
I
We
thought
need to
through
determine
the-
what our flexibility is.
I thought through the ordinance,
not-
we had
may
to
not-
align with the county.
Hang on, what's,
I thought through the ordinance, we had to align with the county. I don't.
I am not certain of that, but we will check that out before we get to the next council meeting, that we will know if we have flexibility on setting the fiscal year. Ms. Garber thinks not.
And just for other interest, and I think our gentleman who presented tonight said that relationship that we can have with other executive directors for the other councils will teach us a lot about how budget flexibility allows you to fund programs that is very transparent to them, and they don't even see our fiscal year. We can do continuation funding, we can do multi-year funding. There's a lot of ways to make our fiscal year not important to them. So that's what we want to make an effort to do, is not make September 30th a crisis.
And thank you so much. Does that answer your?
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so now that brings us to what it's item 9. I mean, it says interim executive director, but I meant for it to be interim administrators. My mistake. Interim administrator. And if you'll turn to your package towards the end under that, there should be
Front page, yeah.
a job description. Now, we did learn something here for Escambia. So there's a job description that Escambia used for its interim. And and it's brief, but admirably detailed and meaningful. Mr. Sachs, I don't know if you, and I didn't, you have no
Yeah,
forewarning that I was going to ask you about this.
I'll tell you briefly, the Escambia was gifted in that we had a community leader who is very well known in Escambia County, who stepped forward and offered her services as the interim administrator for free. And the trust could not ignore that. She's very well respected and a strong leader in Escambia County. And so, yes, there is a job description, and it's great that she has something to look back to when she needs guidance, but they did not have to go through a recruiting effort. They simply agreed as a board that she was the right person.
Did you say
So-
free?
Free, yeah.
I like that price.
Free. So it was great. It was great news for Escambia. And yeah, a blessing for them.
Yes.
Well, what I was going to ask that we consider is that we look at this executive director job description. And that y'all authorize me to put this in language that is for us so that we can get the process rolling of getting people to start expressing their interest so that we can actually start going. I don't think I don't know that I can ask you to just give me that carte blanche authority, but I'm trying to act expeditiously.
Judge, one of the things that I had mentioned at the first meeting, and it's consistent with what Ms. McFadden mentioned, is that I was totally fine with, let's go out, let's find an interim executive director, call it whatever you want. But with one caveat that whoever it was would not ultimately apply for the job. And I think, Liza, that's consistent with really where you're going. You do these nationwide searches to find someone who's, right down the street. I want to make sure that this entire council gets to consider what are we looking for in an executive director and who's most able to serve in that role. And I hope we get a lot of people who are interested in moving to what I think is the finest county in Florida, or perhaps they already live here. But I'm A-okay giving you the carte blanche to get somebody who, the county is comfortable with, has the skill set necessary to handle these administrative duties. Again, consistent with what Ms. McFadden was mentioning.
I think it's worth noting that the skill sets that we want in a permanent executive director may be in fact, are likely very different than what we want in the interim. In the permanent one, we will want a subject matter expert, someone who really understands children's services and the value that programs can bring. But in this role, we're, I think, first and foremost, looking for someone with organizational skills, someone who can help create structure for this organization, this piece to move forward. And I think that's what we're really looking for, someone who can really function in that capacity, not necessarily programmatic.
All right, fair enough. Yes. Dr.
So I guess going back to what Ms. McFadden said, is this a necessity if we go with the administrator? So we have the administrator that can serve in a capacity until we find a permanent executive director. Do we even need an interim executive director? That's a question.
Yeah, I think both are the same thing.
It's the same.
It's six or one, half dozen the other. We just want someone to lead us on an interim basis with the understanding that they are not applying for the job.
Okay, and I agree with you. Even if we call it the interim executive director or an administrator, I think that person should recuse himself from, applying to be the permanent executive director. So I would like to see that built or written in so that it's clear that we clearly understand if they're interim, that they will not apply for the permanent position.
So the advertisement will say that the person who is hired for this position is not going to be it's a one-year position or what?
It's really to set up order.
It's really just, I'm sort of thinking, and just kind of roll with me here. Is there somebody on county staff right now that we could borrow, pay once we set the millage rate, pay the county back for? Is there someone on county staff already that could serve in this role? I don't want to advertise for the position. And ultimately, I think one of the most important decisions we can make is picking that executive director. And I want to do that quickly, like a permanent executive
Or
director.
someone who may be newly retired, who's been a strong leader across
yeah.
the community, but someone who's willing to step into this role for this period to help set it up.
Commissioner Cummings?
Yes, Judge Erstrom, part of my motion to give you authority to contact and corroborate with the county administrator as far as getting us some temporary assistance, including temporary personnel and interim, I guess we can call it interim executive director. I think it's interchangeable.
Yeah.
Part of my motion, Your Honor, was to give you that authority, not necessarily to advertise for that interim position. I think once we feel that we're at the point where we want to hire a permanent executive director, I think we might want to consider maybe a committee, a selection committee from this council to be involved and to maybe make a recommendation of several people or one person or three people pursuant to the direction that we get from the council. And that's after we have done, if we decide we want to do a local search or statewide search or what have you. But I don't think we need to get bogged down right now. I think what we've already voted to do is give you the authority
Fair enough.
so that we can have something in place right now on a temporary basis.
Let me make sure I understand the authority that you're describing. So if Mr. Long proposes somebody like Mr. Mitchell is describing, I could have that authority, or if Mr. Long does not propose something like that, you're giving me authority to find somebody else without further action by the council.
I believe that's the discretion that we have accorded you.
Oh, good Lord. Okay, all right, well.
How much you get paid for this?
And this is, and I assure you, there will be something that says, day to day, month to month, and at will, and no, interim and temporary. Yes, I get it. Sorry, yes, Ms. McFadden.
I was just going to add in, I think I think several people have mentioned it, but I think when you look at the skill set for this particular person, somebody who's familiar with contracting, somebody who's familiar with local and state government, someone who has,
Okay, you are talking too fast. You can talk faster than I can think. So you're gonna have to slow down. Go ahead, start again, would you?
probably administrative skills. first
Yeah.
and foremost.
Absolutely.
Some budgetary skills, familiarity with contracting. Those types of what I would call very high level administrative functionality.
Okay. And what we pay this person if we end up paying them.
I would suggest that the county administrator
Yeah.
will take those skill sets.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they
And
can
say,
grade a
here's what
job.
the county pays currently.
Absolutely.
And because that'd be my hope that they would come on as a county employee. Or maybe, and that's why I said, maybe there's somebody already out there who would be,
hope
perfect
so.
for the role. And I think Mr. Long would.
Yeah, as far as pay is concerned, I'm sure the county has a process for grading out a position. I'm sure that will happen.
All right.
I would like to mention, I don't want to separate finding the interim administrator with advertising for this job. I think this advertisement for a permanent needs to go out hastily. Yeah, I would hope that we're not in the frame that we're going to wait, then we're in good shape for 6 months or 8 months.
But I think we want the luxury of being able to pick the right person.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
for
right,
sure.
right.
No, for sure. But I think, the advertisement should stand for, at least 60 days. I mean, so then we've got, it could be a year before we get the right person that is ready to step in, like gives notice with their job, moves to Tallahassee if it's an outsider. So I don't know if we want to put parameters on the person you're going to look for in combination with county administrator of this is going to be for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. Do we want to give them some kind of framework? But I would say it would be my wish that we craft the job description and get the advertisement out as soon as we can and not delay that.
So
For
we're-
the permanent, not for the interim, for the permanent.
Sure. Ms. Doc-
This job description that's here for the interim says 6 to 12 months. Would you be opposed to Judge I apologize, Sorensen?
I don't speak any Swedish.
Sistrom, okay, I apologize. For the judge to find someone who is willing to serve in this capacity for 6 months, 6 to 12 months, but then that gives us the time to refine a permanent job description for the final executive director. And then we do the job search and we have our committee, whoever looks at that person. But it's our expectation by 12 months from today, we would have that person on board and fully
That's
functioning.
exactly right.
That works.
All right. So is there, I believe there's a motion. I believe there's a
Well,
second.
Actually, I think Commissioner Cummings made a very good point. That was her original motion
Is already. All right.
gives you that authority. I mean,
So what you're telling me is I've already
You
failed.
got-
Has that motion been seconded, by the way?
yeah, we voted
Yeah,
on
last
it.
meeting. I was gonna say.
All right. So that sounds like that's the will and consensus is that my job is to come back to the next meeting with a name and a person and a structure and offer.
Ideally, yes.
And just one, I don't want to beat this dead horse, but Ms. Strickland's point is such a great point. And that's why I said this, to me, the single most important decision that we as a council have to make is who is going to be that executive director, and it cannot come soon enough.
Yeah.
So as soon as we've got that person on board, that judge you select or in connection with the county, once we've got that person on board, my directive to them is, yeah, work on a budget, do this and that, but oh, by the way, could you please put together a job description? Maybe it's based on Escambia, maybe it's based a little on Alachua, Palm Beach County, Broward County.
Start the process.
Yep,
Yeah,
start
let's
the
get this,
process.
yeah,
Yep.
let's get the ball rolling and let's get a real executive director on soon.
And if I could whisper in, I asked Walter if a nom and gov committee was in these new bylaws, and he said at this point it's not. I'd like to recommend that we consider adding a nom and governance committee to
We adding a what?
nomination and governance. committee to
Nomination and
bylaws.
governance
So this
committee.
is a very important process so that we have some folks with expertise that help guide this through.
I would recommend, just for discussion, that it not be specifically added because the bylaws do allow for us to establish ad hoc committees. So I think an ad hoc committee could be labeled nomination and governance. That'd be great, but not to actually put it in the bylaws as a formal standing committee, because it wouldn't be one you would need all the time.
Yeah, let's hope we only.
Yeah,
need
we
it
hire
once
one
every
every
30
year.
years.
Hire one who lasts 20.
That's fine.
It's a great ad
20
hoc
years.
committee, though.
Okay, but maybe that's a discussion item for the next time then.
All right, so yeah, all right, fair enough. Okay. Timeline. So this just is really about setting the next meetings. And my hope is when we get to the bylaws and we're finally operating under the bylaws, we will have monthly meetings unless we don't need a monthly meeting or unless there's some overwhelming urgency. We've got 3 meetings that we're trying to schedule for next month. The June 2 regular meeting, a June 15 and a June 22 regular meeting. And the reason we're setting 3, I mean, perfectly. I'm terrified that we'll need 3 meetings. I hope we don't need 3 meetings. But because there's so much to get done with TREM and everything else, now the hiring of the interim and bylaws and budgets, I just wanted to have the ability to meet. So June 2, June 15, and June 22, is that acceptable for meetings all starting at 2 o'clock? And is the chambers available those days? Do we know?
The chambers is available for the 2nd, June 2nd. The 15th, we are looking for a location, and then the 22nd, the Leon County School Board is graciously.
All right, so we're homeless on the 15th, the 22nd at the school.
You're in
board.
for a rude awakening when you come to. Yeah, no, that's fine. If we can accommodate this group, we're more than happy to do that.
Excellent.
So
You did.
Sorry, I've already been.
There you go, good. You don't need me.
I do have a question. I'm sorry. So I thought the meeting was going to be scheduled on either the 15th or the 22nd. That was my understanding when we did the doodle poll. Are you proposing both dates?
I thought it's possible that I didn't read the doodle poll correctly. I am proposing both dates. Does that, Jessica, help me?
With the schedule, trying to compare everyone's schedules, there was 4 dates left in the entire month after the 2nd available. And one of those was a Friday and one was a Monday. So the 15th and the 22nd were the only ones that weren't a Monday and Friday that fit in the majority of the council's schedule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not available on the 15th. I guess that's just my problem, but I'm just letting you all know that the 22nd definitely works and the 2nd. But I wanted to let,
So here's my hope.
sure.
On June 2nd, we decide we don't need June 15th.
Okay.
If we need June 15th, we'll have it scheduled. It'll be noticed. It's a lot easier to cancel a meeting than it is to notice a meeting.
Okay.
So is that acceptable to everybody? Well, the next scheduled meetings is June 2nd, June 15, and June 22.
June 2nd doesn't work for me, that's fine. I just don't know how many absences were allowed since I haven't read the bylaws.
You're good.
Yeah, I actually think that especially before we set regular meetings, that absences don't count. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
and again, you may or may not remove.
exactly. You were there for that vote.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so these are busy people who've got an awful lot to do. And yeah, I would propose that maybe we even put it in the bylaws that absences during the interim period before we have regular meetings don't count for your 3 absences.
And Judge, I would also like to suggest that, yes, June, last minute, summer, I know a lot of us are going to have conflicting issues, but could we get on a schedule where we are the 2nd and 4th Thursday, whatever? So we can go ahead and extend our calendars for those times.
Let's do. So Jessica, can we set out a doodle poll and try and get on for July and August? So I'm anticipating for July and August, and we've got to have the public hearings in September.
And are you intending twice a month for a long time?
No, I'm opposed to twice a month now, but
And then ultimately just once.
yeah, I'm hoping we don't have 2 meetings a month after July.
Okay.
Plus, we'll have an interim administrator and I won't be so paranoid all the time. All right, so that's it. So we've got meetings, we will notice meetings June 2nd, June 15, June 22. My hope is that we cancel the June 15 meeting. And so that is our timeline. The agenda for the next meeting is going to be call to order, approve the agenda, approve the meetings, public comment, status update on, I'm going to combine interlocal agreement and interim administrator. I'm going to notify the property appraiser. I'll just report back if there's any problems with notifying the property appraiser of levying this year. We'll present a proposed budget. Plan to vote on a proposed budget, I hope. And we'll plan on adopting bylaws. Okay. Agenda for the next meeting. And a schedule of meetings. And member comment. And public comment at the beginning, of course. All right. So the agenda that I'm going to propose for the next meeting, public comment, approval of agenda, approval of minutes. We'll discuss the interlocal agreement and the interim administrator, really the infrastructure structure of the council. Report on notifying the property appraiser. Present a proposed, we'll call it a proposed interim budget. We'll plan to adopt bylaws or consider adopting bylaws. The agenda for the next meeting, regular schedule of meetings, July, and then hopefully pick our monthly date for meetings. Member comment and adjournment.
Judge, I have two recommendations.
Please.
In the second item, I believe, was the interim administrator discussion. I think it might be a good time to also establish the governance and nomination committee at that time.
Yes, sir. Is there a motion? A motion to establish in, what do we call it? Governance and
Nomination and governance committee.
nomination, governance.
And then with the budget discussion to establish a budget planning committee.
And a budget, interim budget plus budget plan.
And then I had requested in a previous meeting that we agenda, maybe not at the next meeting, but at a future meeting, discussion on ethics and conflicts of interest. We have the financial reporting that comes up every July 1.
Could I task you with finding somebody to talk about?
Absolutely.
See, look at that.
But it could, if there's too much on this agenda, it can be in the next June if we have one.
Let's do that. Let's plan on having it at the following meeting. Is that agenda acceptable? Any other discussion on the agenda? Any other discussion?
One point.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Just because I'm going to miss the June 2nd meeting, on a June 15th meeting or at some other meeting, perhaps, having Michelle come and talk about the millage rates that have been used at different counties.
Okay. I think that will really be appropriate for the June 15 or June 22. When we're trying to figure out, when I say we, you, because I can't. When you are trying to figure out what because the next communication to the property appraiser is what is the millage?
Just for clarification, I know we voted that we would notify the property appraiser of our intent to levy.
Yes.
That's something you will do, right?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
know it's a lot of responsibility on you, but I just want to make sure.
It's me. It's on me. It's on me. Until we get the interim hired and I quit. But that's on me. All right. So with that objection, we'll show that that'll be our next agenda. Any other member comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
we have a website.
We have a
We
website.
do.
Outstanding.
I know. So I want to give many thanks to Matt Cavell at the county and County Administrator Vince Long for getting this up and running for us in less than 2 weeks. Isn't that when we met 2 weeks ago? So just for everyone's benefit, I want to show you how to get there for the public as well. So from the main tree of the Leon County site, they have listed it under citizens committees. I know it's not a citizen committee, but that's where it is. So everybody just go with it. So you click on citizen committees. I'm not sure if we can get back to the main, can we get back to the main tree? I just want everyone to know where it is because agendas are here, meeting dates are going to be here, the minutes are going to be here, our names are here, so everybody needs to know. That's okay, no worries.
Sorry, I did.
That's okay. So if you scroll down on the left, it says citizens committees, and then if you hover, the pop-up comes up committee lists. So we are listed here, children, so you scroll down, Children's Services Council of Leon County. Here we are, click on meetings, click on membership. So just go with it because this was done hastily, but we are listed there by individual. Our term is there, but more importantly, it's a place for us to put our meeting dates, our agenda, the minutes when they are approved at the following meeting. Thank you for this is Jessica has done an amazing, this is not her job and she's been coordinating all of this and has done an incredible job. Mr. Mitchell, the only thing you did ask about was emails. The only email listed right now is for our appointed, what do we call her?
Clerk?
Registered agent, yes, which unfortunately, I'm sure she's gonna start getting email. So they said they would work on that, getting us, so we need our administrator, whoever's gonna be appointed, to then have his or her contact information there. And then they were gonna add a little link for all of us. So I would assume that we're all gonna have a Leon County, Florida. They said that's no problem. They'll work on that the following week. So here we are.
Outstanding. Thanks so much. Any other
Very good.
comments?
Judge, if I may, I know we're heading to the bottom of the hour, and I want to apologize again for using one of my 3 absences on the first meeting. Unfortunately, it was unavoidable, but I just want to say what an honor it is to serve with such an esteemed group. I've been looking forward to this for a number of years now. I'm excited about the opportunity it's going to present to the children in our community. I'm a lifelong resident of Tallahassee and Leon County, was born in his hospital, a product of our public schools. 3 things you should know. Job 1 for me as school superintendent is keep our children and our people safe. Job 2 is to manage taxpayer dollars. And I'm very responsible and take that job very seriously. And then job 3, and we talked about the importance of naming an executive director. The third most important thing that I do is name qualified principals at school communities. And Carmen's an example of that.
That's right.
Oh, thank you.
So, but I'm very excited about the opportunity this group is going to provide to many different programs to enhance the quality of life for our children in Leon County. So again, want to thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Any other member comment?
I was gonna say a comment. Normally, I'm not the quiet one in the bunch. But this is such.
No, you're not.
I'm not, but this is such a unique opportunity, but this is outside of my normal box. So if you ask me about area and perimeter and digraphs and all that good stuff about school, I got you. This part is very new to me, but it's so interesting to hear your perspectives because of your different backgrounds. So I really welcome, and I'm really grateful to be in this position to hear what you all have to share. But I love the fact that we all seem to be on the same page. My motto is go slow to go fast. And I feel like we're in that space right now. So I appreciate and I'm loving this. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Outstanding. Any other comments? Any other member comments? We are adjourned. Thank you, folks. Are you a Phil Dunphy fan? Is that what you get?
No,
Slow as,
I'm just always.
slow as smooth and smooth as fast, and slow as fast.
Yes.
Yeah.